today. I am for the first time. Okay.
Y'all ready to get started? Everybody ready?
Pricing for Commissioner Gibbs. State school.
How you doing?
All right, I'd like to welcome everyone. Today I'm Jeff Cook. I'm the chairman of the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission. This is our first committee day of our two-day February meeting. So all the committee members will be discussing and voting on topics. Could we please, that might have been planned. I don't know. But anyway. So today will be the committee members will be discussing and voting on issues, and then tomorrow the full commission will meet. And so to get started, we'll have the roll call, please.
Angie Box. Bill Cox.
Here.
Dennis Gardner.
Here.
Connie King.
Here.
Tony Sanders.
Here.
James Stroud.
Here.
Bill Swan.
Here.
Kent Woods.
Here.
Jamie Woodson.
Here.
Brian McLaren.
Here.
Kurt Holbert.
Here.
Jeff Cook.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Danette. And so if any of the, as we're discussing topics, if any of the folks from the public would like to comment or ask a question, if you'd please step to the microphone, state your name, where you're from, if you represent any club or group, and please direct any questions or comments toward me or whoever the chairman of the committee that might be meeting. And just a procedural note, we have a retention and recruitment committee meeting scheduled for today, but we're just going to move that to tomorrow and just do it all at once. So at the last topic today, we'll just move to tomorrow. And Commissioner Box, do you have your phone off?
Yes, I do now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And a reminder to please turn your phones off, or at least silence those. So, any other announcements from the commission? Director Carter? Great. Well, with that, I'd like to turn the meeting over to David Hanna for a presentation.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the commission for allowing us time for the agenda for this very special award. Today I'd like to let you all know who the award winner is for the Robert M. Scott Hatcher Memorial Scholarship. This scholarship, Robert M. Hatcher worked for Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency for 38 years, including 23 years as the non-game and endangered species program. During his career, he worked tirelessly to protect and restore threatened and endangered species in Tennessee. Most notably, he led the initiative to reestablish the American bald eagle, a bird which is now flourishing in Tennessee. The bald eagle population was basically extirpated in Tennessee around 1960, and currently there are over 200 pairs throughout the state of Tennessee. Bob Hatcher was also instrumental in establishing the Bluebird license plate that went on sale in 1995. Profits from the sale of the plate go to the TWRA's Watchable Wildlife program, and that's funded through an endowment fund. So the Robert M. Hatcher Memorial Ornithological Scholarship was developed to recognize Bob Hatcher's lifetime achievements in conservation. The scholarship is administered by the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Foundation and is intended to award $1,000 to one recipient per calendar year. This scholarship is open to any Tennessee college or university biology student with a concentration in ornithology or avian conservation. So this year, I'd like to take the time and help me recognize Eliot, who is the winner of the 2018 Scholarship Award. Eliot, you want to raise your hand? He's up in the front here. So Eliot is currently attending the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, and is the third recipient of this award. Eliot has been selected for the scholarship based on his academic excellence, extracurricular activities, and avian conservation. Eliot developed a deep interest in biology at a young age growing up in Chattanooga. After high school, Eliot attended and graduated from the University of South Sewanee with a bachelor's of science in environmental science and a minor in economics. Eliot is now working with the Tennessee River Gorge Trust and at the same time pursuing a master's in environmental science degree at the University of Tennessee in Chattanooga. The focus of his work is to evaluate the migratory paths and movement and timing of the Louisiana water thrush and worm-eating warbler located around the Chattanooga area. Eliot is inspired to continue working in the conservation field to help protect avian habitat, educate the public, and ensure we are making informed conservation decisions. And I just wanted to go over some of his academic accomplishments and extracurricular activities. And so at University of South, he's a part of the Phi Beta Kappa National Honor Society. He also graduated summa cum laude from University of the South. And Eliot is a professional kayaker, and he's a member of the Rock Creek Outfitters All-Mountain Team. And so I'd like you all to help me recognize Eliot Berz as the 2018 scholarship winner. And I'd also like to take the time to recognize the Hatcher family who's in attendance. We have Betty Hatcher, Bob's wife, Terry and Jerry Hatcher, who are his children. Thank you for coming.
Congratulations, Eliot, and appreciate all the work you've done so far and look forward to your accomplishments in the future. So thanks for what you're doing. And I'd like to take a moment and welcome my daughter, Katie. She's here today, so welcome, Katie. Yeah. Thank you. And now I'd like to recognize Chairman Holbert for the Wildlife Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to call on Jamie Feddersen, our waterfowl coordinator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, good afternoon. I am back here. We talked last month about gave you a preview of what we would recommend for migratory game bird hunting and seasons and regulations, and so we're gonna keep going with that. I'll give you a reminder. I'm not going to give you the full detailed presentation that I gave last month, but I just want to remind you of some things. Some of the changes we're recommending are based on public input. We do receive, we solicit comments during an open period in October and November. We get those comments in. We try to do what we can to accommodate them. We also had a public opinion poll that we put out in, I think it was in early December, late November, early December, where we asked folks specifically about some proposed changes that we wanted to make with crow, woodcock, and duck season. So I'll go forward and talk to you about those things. We're going to be recommending some changes to those seasons. And we've got some housekeeping things with some of the changes we want to do with the duck season that we need to kind of clean up with the geese, cranes, and the hunting with raptor seasons. So generally when I present these, I kind of categorize them in the early season and then ducks, geese, and cranes. So looking at our early season migratory game birds, there's no changes in any of the federal frameworks. I'll remind you that a lot of the things that we can and can't do with migratory game birds are dictated by the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they put these in a set of frameworks that we have to work within. And so there were no changes to those frameworks. Really all we're working on are calendar date changes within Tennessee. Specifically with woodcock and crow, we do have some fairly substantial changes that we're recommending. So our woodcock season currently is set to open on the second Saturday in November and to run through the fourth Monday in December. That's a 45-day season that we get for woodcock. What we've heard from a lot of hunters is that we get a lot of woodcock moving through in January. It's sort of geographically located. I hear that mostly from hunters that are in East Tennessee. The West Tennessee hunters say, we're timing it just right. We're getting them in late November, or we're getting them in November and early December. So what we wanted to do is we want to split the season to try to accommodate both groups of hunters, West Tennessee hunters, East Tennessee hunters. And this came out fairly positive in our public opinion poll. We had a fair number of folks that indicated that they like the idea of a split season. And so that's what we will be proposing, is having these two splits as the way you see them up on the slide. Phase 1 would open for 23 consecutive days, beginning on the second Saturday in November. And then Phase 2 would open up on January 10th and run through January 31st, which is the last day that we can have a woodcock season. The change that we're recommending for crow, this is a little different than what I previewed last month. Last month we had 3 different phases on there where we were going to run June 1st through August 18th. We were going to have some days in October and November, and then we were going to have some days in December, January. Got another big round of input from crow hunters. And what they said was, well, that's way too complicated. We just don't want that. Let's, 2 phases sounds great. Let's leave 3, let's have our warm hunting days, June 1st through August 18th, 3 days a week. We're okay with that. Let's put a big bulk of the rest of the days, October through January, or October into January. So we listened to them. That's, we ran this through staff. Nobody had a problem with this. And so this is the recommendation that we're coming forward with. The big move was, getting more days concentrated in the cooler months, and taking them off of the weekend. So we have a fair group of hunters that want to hunt during the week. They don't want to be restricted to the weekend, and they wanted those days in the cooler months. So that's the reason for this change. So the season dates for the migratory game bird seasons, this is what we're recommending they be. Again, just the change to the woodcock and the crow are really, those are the only changes that we're having on this group of birds. And then here are the dates for the early duck seasons and the rails and the moorhens. This is no changes from what we normally do. Our dove seasons still centered around the same 3 phases. No changes to these days. Well, calendar changes to these days, but they fall within the same general time frame that we normally have them. So I'll move on to the waterfowl and coot. You'll see, this is sort of the group of birds that I'm going to be talking about. There are some changes in the federal frameworks that necessitated us to change some of the rules that we have with hunting. I want you to note, spoiler alert, the number of birds in the number of pintails in that picture is going to change. So the current federal framework allows us to hunt no later than the last Sunday in January, and it allows us 2 pintails in the bag. I'll come back to that. So this is what our season would look like under the current frameworks. We'd have to stop hunting on the last Sunday in January. We normally count back 58 days, and then that would bring us to the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And then we would have certainly our phase 1 would have to fall either on Thanksgiving and the day after Thanksgiving or the weekend prior. But we're not going to do that because the federal frameworks, we're anticipating a change of no later than January 1st on the ending date. And as you notice, the number of pintails has changed to 1. So we had that public opinion poll that I told you about. We talked to a bunch of duck hunters, and what we came out with was that our recommended season date is going to accommodate that change to a January 31st closing. It's going to have phase 2 start on a Saturday, which was really important to the duck hunters, and we're adding those days that we would have had at the beginning of phase 2. Since we're starting on a Saturday, we needed to put those days somewhere, so we're going to put them at the end of phase 1, so we're getting extra days in phase 1. And we're going to be starting phase 1 for statewide on the day after Thanksgiving. So that's what it looks like on a calendar. Here's what the days look like. And then I'll also remind you, I've said it before, but we have to decrease the daily bag limit of pintails from 2 per day to 1 per day. Our youth waterfowl season, there's no change there. It's going to be the first 2 Saturdays it's the first 2 Saturdays in February, so it follows the close of the regular duck season. And then with the change of season dates for duck, we had to sort of clean up. This is merely housekeeping things with our goose seasons, because our goose seasons all follow what our duck seasons do. Again, the goose seasons that I'm showing here with white-fronted geese, and then with all the other geese, the light geese, the Canada geese, and the Brant, just housekeeping changes to accommodate the changes with the duck season. And so that'll shift our light goose season a little bit, but still takes place after the close of the last goose season. Again, we had to do the same sort of cleanup, housekeeping with the sandhill crane seasons, because our sandhill crane seasons mimic our phase 2 of the duck season. So this is what our crane season would look like. And then same with raptor hunting for migratory game birds, simply housekeeping here, making sure that the crow season aligns with the changes that we made with the crow season for the gun hunters and also for the duck season. Just simple housekeeping changes. So just to summarize what the agency is recommending, the recommended changes we have reflect stakeholder input. We'd like to split the woodcock season to add some days in January to accommodate those East Tennessee woodcock hunters and the timing of when woodcock move through that area. We're splitting up crow season, just 2 phases rather than the 3 that I had previewed last time. It puts more days in the cooler months and puts them during the week when a fair amount of crow hunters want them. And then changes to the duck season based on anticipated changes to the federal frameworks, ending our season on January 31st, decreasing the pintail duck bag limit, and then again the housekeeping changes for the geese, cranes, and hunting with raptor seasons. So, Mr. Chair, at this point, I'd be happy if the Wildlife Committee could endorse this recommendation from the agency for the full commission to vote on tomorrow.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. I'm going to take a motion in a second before I open it up for discussion. So, do I hear a motion? Second. I have a motion in a second. So, anybody, Jamie, if you will, I'm going to request you pull up the calendar. I think
Sure.
that'll be the most questions if there is any. So. Okay. Any questions from anyone? Commissioner Cox.
We did this once before, opened on Friday after Thanksgiving, and the people that lived away from West Tennessee, where most of the duck hunting is, were upset about it. And as I talked to you, Jamie, but so I don't know why we would do this again. I don't know why we wouldn't run this Saturday through Tuesday or Saturday through Monday and open the next Friday to keep the days. But the day after a holiday at Thanksgiving, you're making people choose either Thanksgiving or miss the opener if they live in Nashville or up this way. Even in Southwest Tennessee, it's 3 or 4 hours to Northwest Tennessee, and you have to leave at midnight to get where you're going after Thanksgiving, and it's a problem. So you don't lose any days, and you have a Saturday opener, and I don't know why we would do that. And I just think a Friday opener is going to be a problem for people that live in Middle Tennessee, especially Middle and East Tennessee.
Okay. Commissioner Cook.
The biggest reason for doing that is that the complaint that folks had initially when we discussed going to the 31st is that they would be losing a weekend, is what, when you know, because they do possibly some years would lose a weekend. Well, that Friday is basically a weekend. You know, most people are off from Thanksgiving. Many people take that Friday off, and families are together. It would just be one more opportunity for folks to hunt, and it gives them basically half of a weekend back. And some years, they're not going to lose a weekend. They'll just have an extra day of hunting. And I understand that some people are going to have to make a decision, but, you know, we want to give people the opportunity. Just because some don't want to do it, we don't want to remove everyone from the option of doing it. And most importantly, there were very few comments in the past month opposing this, so most people were for it.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I'm just telling you, the last time we did it, it was a problem. And we said we shouldn't have done that. We opened on Thanksgiving one year. That was a bigger problem. But you're not losing a weekend. And you're not losing a day. And you're giving them a 3-day weekend the next weekend. So I'm just telling you that I'm not going to support this and go and try to amend it. I don't know whether it'll pass, but I think based on my recollection on what we did, it was not. You're not taking anything away from anybody because everybody wants a day to get ready after Thanksgiving. So I don't see that it's helping, and it's going to hurt a lot of people that travel. So I get what you're saying, but you know.
Well, I understand. I think I believe that the previous time it was just like Kentucky does. It was Thanksgiving through Sunday, I believe. Was that not correct?
Done both.
You've done both?
Mm-hmm. My recollection is, and both of them were very unpopular.
Well, I don't know if it's because now folks it's worth it to them to go to the 31st. But you do, if you look at different calendars, different years, you are going to lose a weekend sometimes. Sometimes you don't. You know, it's so variable. But the point of the whole thing is to give people the most opportunity the first few days when there's the local ducks, and then give them the greatest opportunity to harvest ducks, you know, at the end, and to make it work. That's what it takes to make it work. But again, I go back to the public comments. There just weren't many people opposed to doing this. Maybe the attitudes have changed, and they see the benefit of what we're doing. And, you know, nothing's set in stone. It can always be changed.
I understand that, but you are taking a day away from Middle Tennessee hunters. That's what you are doing that.
Well, or maybe you're giving a day to Tennessee hunters. I mean, that's
Middle Tennessee.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I view it as we need to give everyone the opportunity, and they can choose what to do with it. I'd hate to, you know, just because somebody else can't do it, somebody else doesn't want to go. I mean, you know, everybody should stay home. I understand the dilemma, but, you know, our job is to give them opportunity.
Any other comments? Commissioner Woodson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know that this has we've debated this actually 6 of the 6 years that I've had the privilege of serving on the commission. And just a couple of thoughts. I support this proposal for a handful of reasons. One, as one of the commissioners who represents Middle Tennessee, I love the later season. I think it is so long in coming. It's been a conversation that's a very passionate issue for so many hunters across each Grand Division, which has been great. And just as I don't recall the Friday openers. I'm sure we've done that in the past. I don't remember doing that. When we opened on Thanksgiving Day, I remembered voting against changing it from Thanksgiving Day because my family likes to enjoy Thanksgiving and we like to hunt. And as a Middle Tennessean, we could have done all of those things. And this is the first time we'll be able to celebrate Thanksgiving. And then as a family, we'll be able to hunt together. And I think it's going to be wonderful. I'm really looking forward to it. And that was certainly what we heard from folks primarily in Middle and West. I don't know that I've heard folks in East Tennessee, give comment on this, at least to me. But I think it's going to be a really exciting adjustment. And while it may not work for everyone, I'm not sure that there's a calendar that would work for everyone. And so I love this schedule. I think it's going to be a great change. And I think for the folks who've been calling me for 6 years on extending this as late as we possibly can, this is very responsive to hunter input, and I personally appreciate it.
Okay. You know what I'm saying is not changing the ending date.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Ending date I like, and I like it on Friday. Okay. Both of them.
Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Chairman. My concerns are along the lines of Bill Cox's, and I was just wondering on your public survey when you got the public input, was one of the questions specifically, what do you think about a Friday opener after Thanksgiving? Was that a specific question within that public comment period?
No, sir. We did not ask that specifically. This was an idea that was brought up in discussions with staff. I think there was some folks in Region 1 that said, hey, it might be a good idea. Friday is a day off. In order to, I think really what it was to, if you look at how Phase 1 and Phase 2 lay out, if we ran it on a Tuesday, we would only have a 3-day split. And the thought was if we shifted it forward a day and started on a Friday, we'd give a 4-day split. It's not a big split, but it's 1 day more of a split, which is very popular with in the ideas of duck hunters to have more days in between your Phase 1 and your Phase 2. Gives the ducks time to settle down, and you get sort of that that second opener is much better when you have more days in between.
Yeah, I understand all that. I'm a avid duck hunter myself, and I've been chasing them for a long time. And I get them getting comfortable and you going out there and having a second opener, so to speak. But opening day of the season is the biggest day in duck hunting. Mm-hmm. It's the one everybody looks forward to. It's the one you've suffered all summer long and prepped all your gear for. And to change it without a specific question that says, what do you think about a Friday opener after Thanksgiving to a vast majority of people? We talk about tradition very often on this commission. And tradition has been, for the last several years, that it opens on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And so I'm not stuck on tradition, and I think good changes are great, but I think we need to do it, we need to make sure we're doing it for the right, under the public's, the public comments that support that change. So I like it. Friday doesn't hurt me any, but I know that I'm not the only one that hunts them.
Does it have to do with this, or is it different? Wait a minute. I'm the chairman of the committee, but I'm going to state my opinion. I look at the 6th, and that's the Friday we're all looking at, and my opinion is I like the Friday after Thanksgiving. If you go to the 6th, you're going to have to, obviously that's most people work that day. The kids are in school. I think there's multiple benefits to the way it is, the recommendation is right now. Most people are off that work for that Friday. It gives opportunity for families to go because kids are out of school. If you move that extra day to the next Friday, you're going to lose a lot of participation, in my opinion. You're going to exclude kids from being able to go. And we're all talking about it being a great time to be with the family, and it is. I love spending that time with my kid, my son. So if you move it to that Friday, you're gonna really eliminate a lot of people from being able to hunt, in my opinion. But anyway, that's just my opinion.
And just to be clear, Chairman, I was thinking that adding the Tuesday rather than the next Friday, so both your openers would be on Saturday. You know, there's several ways to play that, but, you know, it's still, like Jamie referred to, it's still just a 3-day gap, and I understand the rest period is nice for the ducks, so you got to balance it somewhere, and I get that.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Box?
Yes, sir. And I agree with Commissioner Woodson's comment on later the season is the better. I think most duck hunters would like season end March 31st, but can't do that. I've had some concerns from the Reelfoot zone only as far as changing of the dates a little bit as far as the guide and what they have already scheduled. As far as being, right now it's 16th through the 19th. We've got 4 days of the opener, and I think they'd like to see the 9th and the 10th as 2-day opener, and then go December 5th and 6th through the 31st. So that changes it the week before, Thursday and Friday before statewide. And that'd give 2 days a weekend, so it'd be the 9th and 10th.
But you're going to put the opener on a Thursday. Weekend.
He said the 31st.
December 5th is a Thursday.
Is that correct? So the 9th and 10th, opening 2 days instead of the 4 days it's scheduled for right now. And then go through the 31st.
And then adding those 2 those 2 days, what we currently have them at the 18th, 19th, saying started on the 5th and the 6th?
That's correct.
Not the 5th and 6th of what?
December,
December.
for Reelfoot only.
And just for the rest of the members of the committee, I want to really make sure I understand what the proposal is and what feedback we've gotten for that adjustment, which I think obviously reasonable people can agree and disagree on all this stuff. On the 9th and the 10th just seems so early, but I'd love to just understand the proposal again, if it's going to be
I'm
in
going
the
to
form
state
of
it
a
like I
motion.
understood it, and you correct me if I'm wrong. Your proposal is to open Reelfoot on the 9th and the 10th, close it until December the 5th, open it back up through the 31st,
5th is correct.
which it would open on a Thursday.
We can't add the 2 days at the end because it'd go over January 31st.
Is there a reason 9th and 10th and not 16th, 17th?
They want the week before, if there's possible, with the guiding and the schedule it is now, that's what they're asking for. Just 2 days, opening weekend.
Been open that early before?
It's been the 16th and 17th now for 4 days.
I thought what you were asking was have 2 weekends, 9th and 10th and the 16th and 17th. Is that what you said?
No.
Well, I'll say that we can't do that. We're not allowed to have 3 splits because we have two zones in the state. We're not allowed to have 3 splits in any of those zones, so we can't do that according to federal frameworks.
The first 4 days, open season, we leave it at 4 days, we can do 2 days, 16th and 17th? No. Okay.
I'm not sure what you're asking. So just doing the 2 days, the 16th and the 17th, and then taking those additional 2 days and adding them somewhere. We can do that, yes. Yes, we can do that.
I think if you're saying as far as the first 2 days, once they hunted, it's kind of flat. Those Monday and Tuesday are kind of flat for them as far as hunting. So we're trying to add those days later to the season before the 31st cutoff. So that was their concern. I wanted to ask about that.
Commissioner Gardner?
So under that proposal for everybody in Reelfoot that isn't a guide, that puts your second opener on a Thursday? That doesn't seem like a great idea to me.
That's what they're asking for, so we need some.
Any other comments? Commissioner Cox?
Yeah, is Jeff Martin here? I'd like to know, don't you have real foot? Yes. I'd like to know your opinion on changing this date and what you think for.
The early real foot zone duck season has always been 2 days. The ducks are there early. They shoot them hard one day. Second day, there's a few left. They're gone. I think they would like to have those 2 days, and instead of a 4-day where they've got Monday and Tuesday and no birds, is having the rest period till December 5th, picking up those 2 days in and going straight through.
So at the second opener on Thursday, you think?
Not the second opener on Thursday.
Thank you.
Jeff, I actually have another question too.
Mr. Woodson?
Jeff, thank you sorry. The night seems so early. Why that early?
That has been a traditional thing at Reelfoot back in the days when the lake would freeze early. They couldn't get to blinds, and they've always had those 2 days because they have early gadwalls and weedings on the lake.
Uh-huh. And they don't have them the next week?
They could, but we get into the deer hunts
Okay.
around the lake. And it's been an issue in the past with deer hunters and duck hunters going,
Okay. And I'm just super ignorant. I can't actually remember. Is it the current early season? How long has it been on the 16th or the later date, not the earlier date? When did it change?
it's been like that as long as I can remember.
It's been like this.
No, the week before. Usually
The week
second
before. So
weekend.
y'all are wanting what you've got now,
Yeah,
even if you have to short yourselves 2
Those
days.
2 days, that Monday and Tuesday, after the first 2 days, we want to put those in front of the lake segment on December the 5th. Instead of a 4-day opener in an early segment, have a 2-day and put the additional 2 days, December 5th, and going straight through.
And when we say they want it, as you know, I have so much respect for you, and your opinion really matters to me, period. I'm wondering about how the average hunter experience who's probably working, and that opening day is a big day. I'm kind of wondering about that.
The 2 days, the way it is, most of it's local. People drew blinds.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be there. But it's always been an issue of everybody in the state piles in on Reelfoot them first 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of space
Even
is
if it's on a Thursday?
Huh?
Even if it's
It
on a
doesn't matter
Thursday
what
versus
day
a
it is,
Saturday?
When it opens, they're going to go.
So are you more comfortable, do you think, as far as the real foot zone, the 9th and 10th, or 16th and 17th? Because he said we can't do the 9th and 10th.
I think the 9th and 10th, and
Since
then
we-
the December 5th through the 31st.
Okay. Any more questions? Dennis?
Commissioner Gardner?
Hey, Jeff, when the real foot zone, is that just the lake itself?
That's just the lake itself.
Just the lake? So.
The lands and waters of Reelfoot Lake WMA. It's
The
not all
only-
the pits and fields around.
The only blinds that get hunted are
those
the
on
draw
the lake.
blinds? Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Box, let me clarify, are you offering that as an amendment, or is this just, are you just discussing it?
I'd like to offer it as an amendment.
Okay. I'm going to state the amendment, see if we get a second, and then we can discuss it.
Can I ask a quick question before you do that? Help me with my counting, but if you take the Monday and Tuesday and move it into the opening with the regular duck season, is Reelfoot losing anything? Why wouldn't you, instead of opening to Thursday, why wouldn't you put it Saturday to open in the regular season? They're not losing anything, are they?
Yeah.
Off the back of what?
Unless you leave it,
Where does he say 4 days?
So they're gonna lose 2 days?
If
Because they're
you-
losing them where?
if you, under this proposal, if you just did it the 9th and 10th and did not add those 2 days on Thursday, you would lose 2 days. Now, you could do the 4 days starting on the 9th and still leave a Saturday.
That's what it
open.
looked like, but I want to make sure I'm thinking about it right. They're still going to have 60 days, won't they? If they open Saturday, 9th and 10th, and whatever the last Saturday is, they still have 60 days, wouldn't they?
Yeah, nobody's,
Still have 60 days.
yeah. I think the question is the opener part of it.
Opener being 2 days and 4 days.
Yeah. Commissioner Stroud. Yes, sir, I'd be glad to. The amendment is to
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman? Before you take action on this, would it be okay if we took a break? So that, because this is very different than what we as an agency are recommending, and agency staff has contributed to this recommendation. So if you would be willing to entertain a short break so that we can, that staff can get together and discuss exactly what's going on here.
I've actually got a motion on the floor, so I don't know. I'm going to have to either let that motion withdraw. I've already got a motion, so I'm going to have to open it up for a second.
They could comment
Then
overnight.
we will discuss that. So let me state the amendment, so everybody knows what the amendment is. The amendment is to change the real foot zone to an opening on the 9th and the 10th, those 2 days. Moving the other 2 days until the 5th and the 6th, where the real foot zone would open on Thursday, December the 5th. So I have a motion to do that, to amend it. Do I have a second? Let me see if I, well.
My comment is for our committee. If we don't second it, then if it's not second, then can they take the break?
If it's not seconded, we could bring this up again tomorrow.
Mr. Chairman, if you'll allow me, I would just like to let the committee know that the way the calendar falls this year, with Thanksgiving being so late, that's why the calendar looks really jammed up. It won't be this way every year. So next year, I'm almost certain that we're not going to be discussing Friday after Thanksgiving. So I just kind of want to, this is pretty limited to this year, just the way the calendar falls out.
Right.
So I just wanted to make sure the committee members knew that.
I'm going to suggest that we address this amendment. It's a recommendation from the committee. We can, if they've got some reason it shouldn't happen, we could change it tomorrow.
First off, I'm gonna see if I got a second. Thank you, Chairman Woodson. With that being said, I'm going to withhold a vote on this until Jamie has time to discuss this with his folks, and you can come back with us and tell us. If you have time to do that before we get to the end, we'll do it then.
All right.
So, have you got anything else? Are you done?
That was all I had, sir.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for Jamie? I can't take a motion, but does anybody have any questions for Jamie regarding anything?
I do.
I hate to beat a dead horse. I just have a question. This is related to Commissioner Cox and Commissioner Gardner's comments. So, Jamie, I'm going to ask a question rather than scroll this up. This is related to the Monday, the 2nd versus the 6th Friday. Can you talk to me? And I do remember last month you had like 5 different calendars. There are 20 different ways to do this. Lots of good, thoughtful people could disagree about these calendars, so I'm not trying to muck it up. But did y'all think about, talk about, wonder about the difference between the Monday and the Friday? Was it to get the Saturday opener?
Well, yes. It was mainly to have that Saturday opener on the second phase. And initially, in the initial discussions with staff, we had it phase 1 opening on Saturday the 30th of November and going through Tuesday, December 3rd. But in the staff discussion, the thought was, well, virtually everybody is off on Friday after Thanksgiving anyway. Let's shift it forward a day so that way we have 4 days in between phase 1 and phase 2 rather than 3 days in between phase 1 and phase 2, just to give that extra day of rest for the birds going into phase 2. That was the sole reason for shifting it to Friday the 29th.
Gotcha.
All right.
And Jamie, something we talked about also is that, this is next year's calendar, but we talked about maybe working on some language to sort of memorialize what the thought process is here. That would be a 3-day weekend after Thanksgiving. That's pretty clear. That's easy. 3 days after Thanksgiving, whenever that is, and that will move around quite a bit. Then you go to 31st, back up 57 days, but you stop it on Friday. Or I'm sorry, Saturday, the first Saturday that ends up to be the opening day, because the majority of hunters wanted that. And so you're left with a few days in there that are tagged on to the first phase.
Correct.
So is that part of what the rule is going to be? Or is it just going to be every year to year we do this? Or it seems like, wasn't there going to be some language to try to memorialize what I just said?
We'll work on that between now and next January, when I would come and give you the preview for the 2020-21 seasons. So that's when we'll try to work on getting that language that sort of sets it every year. If we can do it, it's just the way that it gets difficult with 31st being a moving target.
And
Yeah.
That's the reason to sort of not just base it on one calendar, but have some standard. So thank you.
All right.
I got one more thing. In my insertion into this, I'm not a duck hunter, but I'm just telling you what I remember. So when I mentioned this to you last time, we discussed it. I believe your comment was we had not thought of the Middle Tennessee people and y'all would talk about it. So I would ask you, if you're going to go talk, somebody here remembers, if you don't think it's a problem with Middle Tennessee, fine. I'm just pointing it out that it seems to me that, last time we opened on Friday, it caused a disturbance in the force in Middle Tennessee duck hunters. And I would urge you to consider that and talk to maybe amongst the staff that might have been here might remember it. So if that's not going to be a problem and y'all are fine with it, then so am I.
All right. Jamie, I'm going to ask you to meet with your crew and come back and tell us if you will support it as an agency recommendation or not, and your reasoning. So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, we're going to move right along. Mr. James Kelly. I will say this before you start, James. Just again, I said it last meeting, but 22 months ago, Chief of Wildlife Mark Goodland and his department was challenged to come up with a strategic deer plan by February of 2019. And I'm happy to say, from what I have seen, that you guys have done an excellent job. And just to commend you and Mark and Joe and Chuck, everybody that was involved in that plan, the whole statewide deer team. You had a statewide team. But hats off to all of you and for the extra time you spent on it. But go right ahead.
Yeah, well, excuse me. Thank you, Chairman Holbert. That's very kind of you to say. And yeah, that's exactly why I'm here this afternoon. We made it. I have here the final copy. So Commissioner Cox, if you could take one and pass it down. Yeah, so just kind of putting a bow on this whole effort, as you said, Chairman Holbert, about 22-month process. And I want to thank you again for your patience. And it's been, in my opinion, a very good process and a much needed process, and it's brought a lot of unity and a lot of clarity for the future of our deer management program in Tennessee. So I'm just going to give you a quick update on what's changed. I presented this as a draft at the December meeting and share with you what's changed since then. You might be familiar with one minor change since then, something called chronic wasting disease, and how that's impacted this process. And yeah, that'll be it. So very briefly about this plan. As I mentioned last time, it is very systems and process focused, and not necessarily management outcomes like increase the population in this unit or decrease the population in that unit. It's more about building these systems and processes that collectively form our capital P program, our deer management program in Tennessee. And this plan is going to, for the next 5 years, annually guide our work plans and funding requests. You'll see this sections of this plan cited in our annual requests for funding and regarding the budget. And it's obviously going to guide decision-making in regards to deer management as well. And I'm just going to paraphrase this, but as I talked about last time, there are 6 goals. A science goal, or we call it our data, our information, or monitoring goal. Basically, what information are we going to get in regards to people, population, and habitat, obviously pertaining to deer, and how are we going to go about getting that information. Then our decision-making goal, how are we going to use that science or information to make our decisions. A support goal, or we could call this a stakeholder support or a flexibility goal. A goal directed towards helping landowners with deer management on their property. The fourth one, CWD, that one needs no explanation, but I will talk more about that in just a moment. Communication goal, how do we communicate with the public about deer and deer management? And finally, a resource goal, not the deer resource, but resources needed to implement this plan. So let's talk a little bit about what's changed since last time. It was actually just a few moments after, a few moments after getting off this stage on December 6th that we got the call from Mississippi that they had found CWD in Marshall County, 12 miles away from our border. So literally moments after walking off this stage. And it's very significant, probably outside of restoration, one of the most significant things that could happen to your deer herd. So some could say it's really poor timing, or you could look at it as fortuitous timing, so we could kind of incorporate that into the plan, because obviously CWD was there while we were making this plan, and so I'm glad it is out on the table before finalizing this. And so since then, we've updated our CWD goal to make it technically accurate. We have documented the discovery of CWD in there. However, we still left that goal intentionally vague to give us freedom to develop a more detailed plan which is what we're currently working on now. And I also want to mention that discovery of CWD doesn't change the fact that we are committed to the entire plan. CWD is just one goal, but it does complicate a lot of things because it is very resource intensive, but we want to be mindful of our other goals in the plan as we move forward with CWD, and as we move forward with these other goals in the plan, be mindful of CWD. So it's just, we need to integrate both of those efforts. And when we were here last in December 6th, we went out for public comment, so anyone could go on the website and provide comment on the draft plan. It was a 30-day public comment period. We received 752 comments. Of the comments that were directed towards our plan, it was overwhelmingly supportive. We did get a lot of comments that were $2, $3, a lot of feedback on the buck limit, even though the buck limit was never mentioned on our plan. But the people who did take the time to read it, it was overwhelmingly supportive. We heard from hunters, farmers, even some motorists who had some concerns about deer. So that was overwhelmingly supportive. We actually also solicited feedback from our partners who we met with at the focus group meetings. And we actually met with a couple of those partners, including the Federation, Quality Deer Management Association, and which were largely supportive. They had a couple items of constructive feedback, which we tried to incorporate, which I'll share more about that here in just a moment. So we did integrate a lot of those partner comments. We documented the planning process. That wasn't in the draft plan. We went through, as we talked about, an extensive and comprehensive process, and we wanted to make sure that whole process was documented from start to finish. So Appendix E of the plan kind of outlines the process we went through, or the methodology to develop this plan. As far as some of the things that we changed, I talked about last time about our desired future condition. I won't go through that now, but to incorporate some of the feedback we got from the Federation and a couple others, that it was pretty technical and might be a little more difficult for the layperson to read. And so we worked with our new communications chief and Austin behind the camera here to kind of pull out some of those sections that really make, bring home the sentiment of this plan, and kind of popped out some of those take-home messages. And we improved hopefully that'll improve the communications with those stakeholder groups. And I'll just give you an example here of what the plan, here's one of those pop-out box, and I magnified one of those text box under our decision-making goal. And I'll just go ahead and read it. We will strive to make deer management processes transparent, well-documented, publicly accessible, have input and buy-in from stakeholders, and to the extent feasible, adhere to wildlife governance principles. So those are the types of changes that you can see, and it's just a much nicer look, and thank you, Austin and Jennifer and our communications department. And with that, I'd like to thank the deer team again. Several of you are here, Dr. Russ Skoglund, Dan Gibbs, Dr. Dan Grove, members of the commission. Specifically, I'd like to mention Chairman Holbert and Chairman Dr. Cook. Thank you so much for your support and for your patience during this process, and the rest of the members of the commission. Agency partners, such as the Federation, Quality Deer Management Association, and several others. DJ Case, who went above and beyond any contractual obligations. Their contract was up in October, and they've been working with us closely ever since then to make sure that we developed a good product. Dr. Dan Decker from Cornell, members of the public, hunters, farmers, just the general public, and many others that I'm sure there's others that I forgot, but thank you to them, and we're excited about moving into implementation, and the work is just begun, so thank you.
Thank you, James. And I've also heard that other states are already actually reaching out to you, or some within our agency wanting to.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to use the word copycat, but use our plan to their benefit. So,
yeah.
So that's a good sign. Does anybody got any comments, Dr. Cook?
I'd just like to echo what Chairman Holbert said, the whole deer team committee. What a great job y'all have done. I know Mark started with you 22 months ago, and thank you for that and all the work you've done. Echo what Kurt said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner
I agree with everything you said. Can we copyright this so we can make a little money if somebody else wants to use it?
Any other comments, Mr. Box?
Very impressed. Great job.
Thank
Very
you.
impressive. I'm really impressed. Thank you so much. Great
Thank
job.
you.
Any other comments? Commissioner Woodson, who was the chairman at the time.
I'm going to pile on just because y'all have gone to such effort, and it was during a window where I was part of the group who asked and was very proud to do it. I really think that this is a process that's best in class. I'm sure it'll get better over time, but being thoughtful and really seeking sportsman input and trying to understand what the bigger picture is beyond like what's right in front of us, I really appreciate it. And I know that time will tell how all these things work out, but I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that y'all have put into this, and really to all of the staff and team and partners, really appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Job well done. I'm gonna stick with deer since we're talking about deer before I go back to Jamie. So I'm gonna call on our CWD coordinator, Mr. Chuck Yoest. Chuck, if you would, when you get done, I mentioned to you earlier, I'd like Dr. Groves to come up after you get done.
Yes, sir. All right, so good afternoon, and James, thanks for that great report. I wish I had as good a news to share. However, I am very happy with the agency's response to the finding of chronic wasting disease in Tennessee, and grateful to our partners that have supported us in that effort. And over the next few minutes, I hope to build your confidence in that response. And it's gonna be a little bit of a strange start, because I want to start with following up on Commissioner Stroud's request for a few images or videos of deer that are showing clinical signs of chronic wasting disease. And then I want to give you a pop quiz after that, and then I'll highlight some of the response efforts and share what we've learned from that, and then share some next steps. So we'll get started. And before I show you the video of the first animal, I'll say that these videos are hard to come by, and generally they're from a cell phone, so they're not that great. So I assure you that these videos will be anticlimactic, but hopefully we'll show you what you're looking for. And this first one is, I want you to realize that these videos are being shot by a person or captured by a person. So there's a person standing there with a deer. So that's one of the first clues as to the animal being infected and then being heavily impacted by the disease. And this is just a short video that shows. And if you just look at the overall stature of this animal, and you see the head's, it's holding its head lower than normal. It's lethargic or slow in its movement. Its ears are lowered, and it just kind of has a blank facial expression, and that's it. So it reminds me of when we're checking cattle on a daily basis. If we see an animal like that, we'll say, well, we need to get that one up, because it's something's not quite right, and it's sick and needs to be treated. So that's the kind of thing you would see with an animal that's far along in the disease. And we have one more here, and this one's actually about to expire as a result, or pass. And you just see this is how they could look at the end stages. You can see the wasting look there, and then some unfortunate symptoms there. But that's about it. And realize that's not the greatest videos, but there's not much out there. But we were able to find those from some other states, and those are classic signs of an animal at the end of their run of chronic wasting disease. And with that, I want to show you this as a pop quiz, which one of these deer has chronic wasting disease. And, you know, the classic signs there on the right is an animal that's similar to the ones in the video that is probably soon to expire as a result of the disease. However, there's as much potential of the deer on the left having chronic wasting disease as there is for the deer on the right. And that's the trick. It's not a fair quiz because they could both very well have chronic wasting disease. And more times than not, the animal on the left is what we find. And the super majority of the deer that we sample look like the one on the left as far as body condition and health. So it's a little tricky. So on with that and to the TWA response. And you guys are familiar with most of this. These are kind of the things that we've been focusing on over the last couple of weeks, and the things for you to make sure you have on your radar as we move forward. And the first is the development of the permanent rule for chronic wasting disease. You'll remember you passed an emergency rule in the early days, and we're now working on developing that permanent rule. And in doing that, we're defining positive and high-risk counties. So we're transitioning from the way we thought of it before, where we had a 5-mile radius, a 10-mile radius, and a 25-mile radius that led to our zone. We're transitioning there based on lessons learned from this phase 1 of the response, and that will necessitate an amendment to the response plan as well. So we'll be working with you on that soon. And that rule obviously not only designates the positive counties or high-risk counties, but it also outlines where the carcass export restrictions apply, and then also feeding restrictions. And the Department of Agriculture, who you'll remember is a close partner with us on this response, is also in the process of developing their permanent rule, which will improve, or I guess I should say lower risk of chronic wasting disease in captive herds. You know, so far it's not known to occur in captive herds, but they want to do all they can to lower risk. So we're working together with them on that. So that's part of the administrative response. Another thing that happened recently, you're probably aware of by now, is a few of us gave the Senate and House Ag Committees a presentation for the General Assembly, and that was well received, and I believe will be a huge step towards having their buy-in as we move forward with this super important issue. And I hope that we can keep that dialogue going, and that was really the only thing we asked while we were there, was that they would continually reach out to us you know, with any issues around chronic wasting disease, so we can partner well moving forward. Another thing that we're focused on now, and we're in the very initial stages here of deciding what research needs to happen to ensure that we measure our impacts and that we know exactly what effects our management actions are having. Some of that will be human dimensions work, where we're checking in with hunters or surveying hunters in the affected area to better understand what their values are and understanding of chronic wasting disease and their support for our management actions. And then also research to evaluate the biological impacts of our management. To give you an idea of why this is so important is because we want to make sure that our actions help control the disease, because there is potential that we could do something in Tennessee that could compromise Mississippi's efforts and vice versa. So it's real important that we measure our progress and work together in a response. And to ensure that, we're coordinating with those states. And for example, I've got a meeting with the Mississippi and Arkansas officials next week, and then later in March we'll have a larger meeting with more of our staff and staff from Mississippi, Arkansas and Missouri. So there's going to be some multi-state cooperation going on there that's going to have to happen for us to best manage the disease. On a communications response, which I've said over and over is equally as important as the biological response, is there's still continual effort through press releases. We've got a tentative date of August or April 9th for a public meeting in Fayette County. And then we have ongoing email communications with our stakeholders. We're developing a training program for staff that will be used regularly through our different educational programs. And then just continual contact with stakeholders through our communications department. As far as the field response, which this is the success of this, it lies with our field staff that have gone out of their way to get their hands on every sample that they could from the affected area. And just last night, I got the final results from the new deer season that was implemented. And you see here now, now we have the 8-county area or management zone that we referred to it. And these are the final results of sampling there. And you'll notice I went ahead and left the column for pending there just for emphasis, but you'll see they're just zeros. But that's our totals. So we're up to 185 deer that were detected with chronic wasting disease, and 107 those in Fayette, 77 in Hardeman, and 1 in Madison. So we now know the final results. And the next thing that we're considering as far as our field response is developing a plan how we leverage the depredation program to best manage chronic wasting disease. For example, getting access to those samples as those deer are harvested, and considering whether we could use our CWD drop-off program for that as well as during hunting season. So those are some things that are beginning to be considered and will be part of our long-term plan. So this is where we are now as far as where the positives samples were collected or where the deer came from that were harvested, which leads to what you have here because of the current system that we have for delineating our management zone with the 10-mile buffer around the positives. And this is an extra challenging situation because we have about 2,200 square miles that are impacted here. If you want to look at it as in acres, you're talking about 1.4 million acres. So it's chronic wasting disease is not only here, but it's here, and it's impacted a fairly large area, and that emphasizes the need for us to be very thoughtful in how we move forward to best manage this disease. And the next steps will be the development of the long-term plan. And I always like to remind everyone that I get an opportunity to that the vision for that plan is to prevent disease spread outside of the area that's already been affected and to decrease prevalence where it exists. And then the development of this plan will be developing new hunting regulations for the affected counties. So that'll be something that will be an emphasis now that or once we get our rule established and now that we have the final results from this deer season. We're going to continue prevention and risk-based surveillance in non-CWD areas. So hopefully we don't find it there, but if we do, we find it earlier. And just want to emphasize, kind of in closing, this is going to be a long-term, sustained effort, and that there's not one defined method that will work to accomplish what we need to, but we do need to be thoughtful in the development of a long-term plan and realize that it's going to be something that I'll deal with the rest of my career for sure. And with that, I don't know if you want me to go ahead and invite Dr. Grove or entertain questions.
I've got at least one question for you, Commissioners. You're good now. All right. Go ahead and Dr. Grove come up, and then we'll let you both answer questions if we have.
Not sure where to start on this. The reason I was asked to
you want me to state? Let me do it. I had asked Dr. Grove. I've got a lot of there's a lot of social media going on, and it has to do with some news out of Pennsylvania, a so-called cure for CWD. So I just asked so the commissioners could have an answer for all the calls and the texts we're getting about it. So that's the reason I asked Dr. Grove to come up and explain that.
I appreciate that. It's always a hard place to start with something like with this issue that we're discussing. And as I'm sure you all are aware, there was a press release, press conference that was held in Pennsylvania, where they claimed that they'll have a cure for CWD within the next 10 years, and they mentioned a bunch of other Creutzfeldt Jakob and Scrapie and things like that too. The reality is, with that press conference, they mentioned bacteria, spiroplasma, as being the cause of prion disease in general. The theory of prions actually was developed in the 60s and then proven to be a real thing in the early 80s. The seminal work that was done with prion disease actually earned the researcher Stanley Prusiner, Dr. Stanley Prusiner, a Nobel Prize in 1997. The work that's been done surrounding prion disease has time and time again been proven that prions are real and prions do exist. The relationship that spiroplasma may have to prion disease has not yet been figured out, and it has been studied for just about as long as prion disease has been. But in terms of the pure prion, we do know that the pure prion can be purified, and it will actually cause infection in animals, and that is actually what we're testing for, is for the prion and the presence of the prion when we're looking at our animals. So ultimately, as an agency and as a professional working in the field, what we look to is what the current available science is to us, and the current available science and the preponderance of evidence that is available to us at this point in time is that CWD is like every other prion disease that's been identified, and that is actually primarily caused by a prion, which is an infectious protein that is misfolded. And so with that, I'll just kind of stop because there's a lot of potential questions. So.
Thank you, Dr. Grove. You have earned your keep. That's all I know to say. I told somebody the other day, whoever hired you deserved a bonus, and I didn't realize there were hundreds of people involved in your hiring. They all
you should have been there
came
for the
in.
interview.
It was really amazing. I mean, it was really the whole. I mean, everybody wanted. I mean, really, it just no. But anyway, you came here to Tennessee, and wow, all heck broke loose, and you've been a great benefit. Joe, this team you've got is unbeatable. I really mean that. Ed, same to you. You got the right team heading it up. But does anybody have any questions, Commissioner Stroud?
I guess my question is, that, what did you say, within the next 10 years, or do you have any indication or anything? You feel like you're
Based on the available information, jury's still out for me. I still believe firmly in the prion theory that has been proven time and time again. And what we know about prions is there's very little outlook right now, at least that I'm aware of, for a cure for any prion-related diseases in the near future. And I hope, in all honesty, and I'll say this as a personally, I hope I'm wrong on that. I really do. But given what we currently know and the current available information to us, that does not seem to be the case.
Commissioner Box.
Thank you. In that study, that information that they gave us, they were saying that they might, they're trying to create a self-test kit for the hunters. You heard anything else about that as far as having that? I know that's probably down the line, but.
With regards to what was presented in Pennsylvania, that was a self-test kit for the bacteria.
Okay.
And that was not a self-test kit for the prion.
Okay, that's what I wanted to.
So I just to clarify, distinguish that. And so ultimately, until that bacteria is proven what the link is potentially, it might be sending people down the wrong road, unfortunately.
Right. That's what I wanted to clarify.
But again,
okay.
I'm not an expert in spiroplasma by any means, and so, but that is what that was referring to as a test for spiroplasma.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Swan.
You
I mean, there's always open discussion for things, and I've read through a lot of the papers that are out there on spiroplasma at this point in time, but I don't rule out anything, I guess, would be my answer.
Second question is, from the test results, it appears that 6% of the tests came back positive. Do you foresee next year when we test the deer, there'll be a higher percentage than 6%?
Unfortunately, I really don't have an answer for that. I would expect it to go up a little bit, just knowing just the way the disease works. The rate at which it increases is variable depending on the deer density and a lot of other factors that occur between now and then.
Do we have a similar type map for Mississippi, south of our border, that shows the radius of the CWD?
I have not seen one. I do not know if somebody else in the agency has, but I personally have not seen one yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I can address that. We do have that, and we're going farther in getting the same information from Arkansas and Missouri. And part of our collaborative efforts in the next few weeks will be really wrestling with what that looks like and trying to have similar approaches to dealing with the issue.
Do you know if they have as high a concentration as we've seen in our area?
So far, they haven't found it. They hadn't found as much as we have. However, we've done quite a bit more sampling than they
That's
have.
what I was gonna ask.
They haven't had the same opportunities that we have for mandatory check stations and such. So their sample numbers are low. However, they are doing what they can, and they are finding more. And I suspect that south of our border that they have a very similar situation than we do just north of there in Tennessee. And so, yeah, I'd say they're in a similar place just south of Tennessee. Now, they are finding more further south. It seems like another endemic area, but I think that's, I don't think the two are tied, but time will tell.
Commissioner Woodson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chuck, I'm not sure who I'm asking this question of, but it's a question more for tomorrow, I think. I'm looking at a Fox News article right now, and the title is "Deadly Zombie Deer Disease Could Possibly Spread to Humans, Experts Warn." I only mention it because I think there is a lot of traffic on social media, and sportsmen are obviously very concerned. The research is either unclear or unknown. And in terms of that connection, I might ask if you all would kind of walk us through maybe tomorrow in the Retention and Recruitment Committee. I know that there are members that are not on the Wildlife Committee who would like to talk about it, but I think one concern is in a world of lots of misinformation or things that are unclear, wondering about do we expect, if we do expect, would there be some sort of negative impact on hunter participation? Like sportsmen don't want to go hunt if they think this is something that's going to impact humans. And so that's a lot of question. And so would you all mind tomorrow during Retention and Recruitment to just think about how you are thinking about this, how you're communicating about it in your plans and everything else? Because I know y'all are doing a lot of great work in trying to make sure the best information is out there for sportsmen as quickly as possible. But this is a lot that's happening right now, and it's probably the most asked about question that I've had in terms of the issue, how it's impacting the herd, how it's impacting individuals, those kinds of things. So would that be a possibility? Feel free to do it now, but there are other folks that I think want to dig in a little bit on this hunter question, and so I'd love for it to be tomorrow as well.
Well, how about I take a stab at it now, and then you just give me some feedback on if you need more, because it's
yes, sir.
It seems like a whole lot, but I don't believe that it is. What's important to realize is that there's mixed results on the potential of it infecting humans. There's conflicting studies, so there's that piece, and I know that doesn't provide a lot of the answers that folks wish they had, but it's kind of it's where we are. So there's conflicting results as far as infecting humans, and then as far as consumption and the risk of consumption, we just, you know, we got to make sure and stay in our purview as a wildlife agency, and we have to fall back on the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, position, and that is that in an area where CWD is known to exist, that they strongly suggest sampling, and if the deer, if the sample comes back detected for chronic wasting disease, do not consume the meat. And that's our message as an agency. And so as far as the impacts to hunting, I think that because of the awkwardness of this in the beginning, I can anticipate some hunters being reluctant, but information from other states shows us that even though we may experience some reluctance for folks to re-engage deer hunting in the initial days, it seems to pick back up, and licensed sales from other states are showing that as well. So that gives me that makes me more optimistic on the subject.
That's very helpful. I think maybe the wondering I have, and I think it's a little different when a news outlet like Fox News is having sort of a really shocking headline, that's worrisome in this moment, but maybe tomorrow you could let us know what other states, when they first had their issues with it, were there changes in hunter participation? Was there a run on any sort of behavior, into it, out of it, neutral? And if you don't know that by tomorrow, that's okay too. I'd love to know how other states, if there was any impact on participation after their initial dealing with it, if that's a fair question.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Chairman. Chuck, I appreciate the briefing, and Dr. Grove, thank you very much. I'm expecting there's going to be quite a bit more people want to get their deer tested now, especially in those areas. Are we, given the fact that we don't necessarily have a lot of faith in this, in the latest public announcement that they had about the spiroplasma, is anybody setting up a lab that can handle a larger amount of samples so that hunters can get their deer tested more quickly to know whether they can eat the meat or not?
A couple of things on that subject. One is that going into next deer season, we're going to do as much as we can to try to narrow down the window, or the amount of time it takes to get results for the deer that we have sampled. And then there will be more effort to try to accommodate hunters outside of the affected counties for sampling. And one thing that we're already wrestling with is an in-state lab. And there's been 3 entities already that have expressed interest in establishing a lab in the state, and we're just in conversation with them to see what kind of agreement we could have, and what kind of cost and what kind of turnaround would that be to try to help with what you're looking for.
All right, thank you. That's great news. One other question. Earlier you said new hunting regulations for the affected areas. By affected areas, do you mean the entire CWD area or the affected counties? I mean, because usually when you display it, you got a 10-mile ring, a 25-mile ring, and with different labels on each one of them. So what specifically are you talking about, and what counties?
Well, I don't know those details yet, but what I can predict, I guess an educated guess would be that you will have a set of regulations for positive counties, and then I anticipate that we'll have another set of regulations tailored to high-risk counties, and high-risk counties being those that haven't had a positive yet but have had one within 10 miles. So I would expect that you'd have regulations for the positive counties, regulations for the high-risk counties, and then the regulations for the other counties like we've traditionally had with our deer units.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Cox.
Yeah, a couple of things. When you look at the map, I mean, you can back up to the map of the area, and the fact that Mississippi, while they may not have tested more, they've got fewer than we have. And with I'm going to ask you a hypothetical question. With the concentration where it is around the county line, Ames in that area. Does that, two things, how long do you think it's been here, and does it indicate to you that it was probably a deer that perhaps was brought in alive and released than it would be something that was brought in from an infected area and disposed of? Because it just appears to me that a live deer would have more circulation and infect more deer than just a carcass would have. And do you have a hypothetical, or would you, if you don't care to comment, it's fine, but it appears to me the indication is that somebody brought a deer in from somewhere else on property and turned it loose. Not that it matters now, but it's interesting that the concentration on it and the spread right there.
Yeah, well, those are really good questions. Respectfully, I'll have to say I don't know, and I hope that's okay, because chances are we'll never know how it was introduced into Tennessee. We know the highest risk factors are movement of live deer and carcasses. So, you know, we just don't know. And as far as timing, unfortunately, we don't know that either. But it's obvious that it's been there for a while. But as far as how long, and you know, I'd caution to even say how long, because it would just be a guess, and I certainly don't want to do that. And I'll ask Dr. Grove if can you add to that, or is that appropriate?
Yeah, it's appropriate.
Okay, thanks.
All right, the only other comment I would have, and I know that we have to be very careful with the Center for Disease Control's recommendation and all that, but the decisions that this agency recommends 90% of the time, 99% of the time, are data-driven analysis and decisions and recommendations. The data does not show any transfer from deer to humans. True? Right? There's no data to show that it's transferable from a sick deer to humans if you eat the meat.
There's no known cases.
Right.
However, there's conflicting studies about the potential of it. And what you see the agency do is err on the side of caution and defer to the subject matter experts, which leads us back to the Centers of Disease Control.
I just don't, you don't want to mislead anybody either way. I understand what CDC does, but it's, we don't want to scare everybody to death either. So I understand. I just want to make that statement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Well,
Dr. Groves, I guess, would answer this, or you might know Chuck. I listened to that thing on Facebook or that about that presentation we're talking about. And if I understand correctly, you said that spiroplasm bacteria, he said that causes the prion. But you're saying the prion causes, it's known to cause a disease without that bacteria being identified, right? Is that, am I understanding that right?
Based on the current available information, yes. The link between the presence of the bacteria and the presence of the prion has not been established what that means. In short, I don't want to get into too much of the research that's out there on spiroplasma stuff, because again, I do not claim to be an expert. In terms of disease, whenever you're trying to prove a disease causes a particular syndrome, there was what's called Koch's postulates, and not all of Koch's postulates have been met. And the simple version of that is that if you take an isolated disease agent from an affected animal and purify that, and then infect another animal and can reproduce that disease, then in the exact same fashion that it was in the original animal, then you've met, because that is the agent that causes that clinical syndrome. And 100% of that has not been met. This is why I didn't go. This is why I tried to generalize originally. But that is.
Yes, you can have, the prion can exist without that.
Yes, they have taken the pure prion and caused disease with the pure prion in multiple prion diseases, in multiple levels of research. There's been over 18,000 peer-reviewed journal articles published on prion disease since the early 80s.
That stinks.
So.
but there's no, he's trying to tie the bacteria that causes the prion to be malformed or whatever to cause the disease is what this doctor's saying.
Yes, that is correct.
And there's, okay.
So they're showing a link from spiroplasma to the prion?
At this point in time, I am not aware of, and there might be something that's not been published yet that we're just not aware of. But from what I've been able to find, I've not seen where there is that. But again, I don't like commenting on stuff that was not my research and that I'm not an expert in.
And just for clarity, you said that is correct and that that's what he's saying, not that this data supports it. But that's what he's saying, but it's not supported.
Yes.
Yeah, very important. All right, thank you guys very much. I'm gonna, before we take a break, I'm gonna go ahead and call on Jamie Feddersen to come back up. I want to remind people where we are. Right now, we've got a motion and a second on the floor to amend Proclamation 1901 to change the opening of the Reelfoot Duck Zone to November 9th and 10th, and then reopening December the 5th through January the 31st. So we're in the discussion mode of that amendment right now.
Thank you for
I'm going to
entertaining
ask Jamie if you'll tell us what you...
Yeah, thank you for entertaining the break. I really appreciate that. And who thought that, I think it's probably been a long time that ducks have caused more turbulence than deer at a commission meeting. So, yay me. So I just wanted to, well, I want to apologize because I think it may have looked like there were, clearly Jeff Martin is a staff member of the agency, and it might have looked like we didn't confer on what was going on, which is not true because Jeff has been part of the conversation all along. And really what's happening, I think Commissioner Box has gotten some phone calls, and Jeff has gotten some phone calls in the last few days about this. And so that's why we might have been, we're a little bit off sync. This is some new information that's come into, Jeff told me my phone has been blowing up for the last 3 days about this. So it just really wasn't any time for us to really have any discussion about making any changes coming into this meeting. So with that being said, I think the agency does not, we don't have any problems with the amendment that Commissioner Box has put forward. So having conferred with Jeff on this and with Bobby and Joe, we're okay with moving forward with that. We don't have any opposition to that at all.
Okay. Anybody on the Wildlife Committee have any comment? Okay. If not, we're going to vote on this amendment. All in favor? Yeah. Any public comment? If not, we're going to vote on this amendment. I'm going to restate it. It's amendment to Proclamation 1901 to change the opening date of the Reelfoot Duck Zone to November 9th through the 10th, then reopening on December 5th through the January 31st. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. Amendment carried. Okay, we're back to discussion on Proclamation 1901 as amended. Is there any other discussion on Proclamation 1901?
You still good with Friday?
We are, and I'll let you know that you asked me about that at the last commission meeting. I did have discussion with staff, and I'm going to look for Richard Kirk to nod and Dr. Russ Skoglund. They will confirm. They will confirm that we did have this discussion with other staff, and we are all still good with that Friday opener.
Commissioner Gardner.
Yeah, it's getting back to the youth waterfowl.
Yes, sir.
We've got it opening on the 1st and the 8th, so I'm assuming that the feds didn't push it past the 14th.
They did not. It's still, the framework is within those youth days have to be within 14 days of the close of the framework closing date for the regular season. So we would not be able to, we would not be able to move I don't think we can move those dates later.
Yeah, we talked about it last
yeah, and I think I looked, and I think that we
had a Sunday and a Saturday
yeah
proposed before, and then Now we're on the 2 Saturdays again, which is good in some ways, but you know, you talk about that break where the ducks rest and relax a little bit. You know, we'll roll right out of regular season, and the very next day is the youth day. So, I mean, I don't know if that's bad because the kids will probably already be there hunting with their folks, and maybe you roll right into a youth day or.
Yeah.
But
I on the computer that I have in front of me, I just looked at the calendar, and so we would not be able to do the 2 split Saturdays like we do.
Correct.
If we waited a week and opened it on the 8th, we wouldn't be able to go another 7 days. That would be the 15th, and that would be outside of the framework. So those 2 days have to be within 14 days of the closing of the framework. So that's why we left it at the 1st and the 8th, the Saturday and the Saturday.
did you look at the 8th and the 9th? Did you discuss that at all?
We had some discussion about it, and really it fell back to most everybody in the staff discussion was that we like the Saturday split on that and not piling it up on a Saturday Sunday. So it's a traditional thing. You know, yeah, that's where we landed on just doing the back-to-back Saturdays.
Okay, and then one last thing on the Friday opener after Thanksgiving is next year, if I did my math right, there'll be 58 days working back from January 31st to get to a weekend, leaving 2 days, which will put us back on a Saturday opener. Is that the way you've got it figured as well?
Yeah, I have we're talking for 2020, 21.
Yes.
Yeah, I have the January 31st being on a Saturday. Yeah, and it would back up 58 days to December 5th, and that we would have.
So your opener would be like 28th, 29th?
Correct.
November.
Phase 1 would be 28, 29, which is the Saturday and Sunday after Thanksgiving.
Right.
Yep. And then, it would close for about a week, open back up on December 5th. So
Okay,
we're rolling
that's-
back into a nicer calendar.
All right.
It's going to change every.
It is with January 1st, with January 31st moving around. It's going to be a moving target. Looking at 21, 22, it gets ugly again, but we can make some things work out.
Mr. Chairman, I'm so sorry. Commissioner Gardner's, I think, asking the question to make an important point. A couple of thoughts. While I love the Friday opener, if it's only going to be for a year, if we decide to do that, and that's the right decision this year, then we should make sure folks know that it's unlikely it's going to repeat itself 2 years in a row. And so, you know, I'm now completely neutral on the issue because I think consistency is something hunters really appreciate. And if it's a one-time thing, that's great, if that's the way the calendar all fleshes out. But I think Commissioner Gardner is making an important point that if we're only going to do this for 1 year, because of the way that next year's calendar, and you all will be making that decision, but I do think that that is a new bit of information that I personally had not considered. So I don't know what the answer is, but at a minimum, we ought to make sure hunters know that this is unlikely to repeat itself 2 years in a row.
Mr. Cook.
Well, you know, you'll have, it's just going to vary. And you'll have leap years, you'll have, you know, as it cycles around on those 7 days, leap years will change it. But just that's a great example of where it's still basically a weekend that they'll get back. Just as because what you're trading, if you do the Friday after Thanksgiving for like a Tuesday or Wednesday, in those years that it happens that way, that Friday after Thanksgiving is like a weekend when most people go hunt. And it's especially a good day when folks are already off and families are together and all those issues. So, you know, I think it just works itself out that we're giving them the most opportunity, and especially holiday weekend opportunities when most people get to hunt.
Any other questions, comments, or amendments?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'll put some work upon myself on this one, and I think that's, you know, I understand Commissioner Woodson's thoughts on this. And I think it might be important for us to reach out to the duck hunting community to find out how important it is to have or not have that Friday after Thanksgiving as a hunting day, because this issue of moving days around to accommodate a Saturday opener for phase 2 is going to be an issue in most years. And so if having a Friday after Thanksgiving opener is or is not important, it's going to be good for the agency to know that, so that way we don't keep on having this discussion year after year when we need to shift those days around. So I'm okay with doing something during the off season, reaching out to hunters and finding out how important that day is or is not for duck hunters.
But I think when you do that, you need to make sure you're telling them that there might be trading a Tuesday or a Wednesday for that Friday, or another weekend that they could lose. Because it is quite variable, as we keep saying. But I think that's the difference: is do you have that Friday, or do you keep it on a weekday? Some of the years.
And again, thank you for, I think we're all trying to get to the right place, and it sounds like we've got a place, and it's a great recommendation, period. I think that if we know now that next year it is unlikely that there will be a Friday opener, to the extent that that's known, I think to Commissioner Cox's point earlier, oh my goodness, we're going to hear about this again, or the commission will, Commissioner Cox and I will. Yeah. We're going to hear about this again. I think if folks know that, the calendar is actually something that is in flux, and it is unlikely that will repeat itself at least 2 years in a row. And I don't know how that gets communicated in the right way, but I think that information, and then supplemented by more understanding, that to the chairman's point, that really making sure that when we ask the question, it's not just do you like it or do you not, but it's really understanding it's just a little more complicated because of what we're trying to accomplish, which is the latest hunting season possible. And all of this is really a result of trying to accommodate that primary interest that we've clearly heard from sportsmen. So thank you all for the exercise. I don't think that this is the easiest thing in the world, and we're all trying to make the best decision.
Thank you. That's a great summary. I totally agree. And that is the point, is to get to the 31st. And what was it, 84%, Jamie, that of
yeah, I
people
think
surveyed?
It was 84, 85%. It was a pretty large number.
Liked going to the 31st. So that is the essence.
I hope that in Chairman Cook's wisdom, he is exactly right, and it's very popular. But if you get 100 emails, speak kindly of me, will you?
I'll hit the forward button.
We're headed there. Unless we've got any more questions, we got to. All right. All in favor of Proclamation 1901 as amended, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With that being said, we're going to take a 10-minute break. Thank you. And we'll get started. All right, I'm going to call on Dan Gibbs, our bear coordinator, to give us an update on a very successful bear season.
Thank you, Commissioner. And, you know, my title really should be Black Bear Update, because I'm just going to spend a minute or two on the harvest and talk to the Commission a little bit about just the status of bears in Tennessee and some of the things that our folks are dealing with, and what we as an agency would like to do and like to see moving forward. So with that, I'll get started, but I will say that I am just going to spend just a few moments on each of these topics to give us time for discussion afterwards. Okay. What am I supposed to hit? There we go. So this year, our harvest was 762. That is quite a bit above the previous record of 589. As you can see on this graph, the green represents the total harvest since 1973, and the bear numbers have continued to increase, and the harvest has increased. And the female harvest this year was 40%. Am I just supposed to be hitting the mouse?
No, you can hit the right arrow on the keyboard.
Okay. Okay, we'll do that. So, sorry about that. So, just as a reminder, we have our bear hunt zones that we established several years ago, and I put this map up here to show you where they are. And this chart here it represents kind of the picture of what happened this year. And you can see in 4 of our 5 zones, we had a record harvest. But that column on the right shows that no zone really had a huge record. This was going on across the entire state. And what's really important is to look at Zone 2, which is primarily Blount and Sevier County. And all of our records in the past have been attributed to black bears coming out of the Smoky Mountains National Park and being susceptible to harvest in those 2 counties. And while they had a good year, it was not a record. So it's across the board. Had a lot of bears harvested in all of our areas. The use of hounds attributed 78% of the harvest, which is about normal, and then the use of archery equipment accounted for approximately 19% of the harvest. I know we had a lot of discussion back in the spring of last year about our bear reserves, and we opened up 2 bear reserves to hunting. And as I told the gentleman that asked me at the check station, we can't predict when hurricanes are coming through, and we had some really bad weather that weekend, and we had a harvest of 2 and 1 respectively in those two bear reserves. Just a real quick pick, this kind of paints a picture for you. So this is the harvest in 2011 of 589, and what I want you to see here is that we were hunting 12 counties and at this time, and then last year we were hunting 21 counties. So a lot more counties open to hunting, and the new counties definitely attributed to the harvest. But if you compare apples to apples, the same counties that we were hunting in 2011, we still would have broken that harvest by almost 100 bears. So one thing is really unique, though. If you look at this, you'll see that we had our first harvest on record that I'm aware of for Knox County. And so I was really interested in this particular harvest, and I called the hunter and spoke to him about it, and thinking, well, he's probably killed that up in North Knox County, but I want to find out where he killed the bear. And it turned out he killed it at the corner of John Sevier Highway and Strawberry Plains Pike with archery equipment. And this really kind of sets the stage for the kind of things we're going to be dealing with. We're going to be seeing more harvest in Knox County. We're going to be seeing more in Knoxville and more harvest in Chattanooga, and because we're getting more and more calls about bears in these areas. So it's something that we're going to continue to see. Just a real quick reminder to the commission that in 2012 we did a pretty comprehensive survey of our residents about black bears and asked a lot of questions. And if any of you are interested in seeing this, you don't have a copy, let me know and I'll get that for you. But I'm going to mention this a couple of times as we move forward. But one thing that's important is, one of the first questions we ask people is, do you believe bears are important? And 87% said, yeah. We think bears are important to Tennessee. They're an important part of the ecosystem, and we like them. And this is a good thing, and it's a very important piece of information to have. But one thing we also learned is that tolerance of bears decreases the closer they get to your home. And this is pretty much common sense. People don't want them in their backyards. And the good thing is, in most situations, you can keep them out of people's backyards if you do the right things. And we're going to talk a little bit about that here in a little while, because we are having these issues that are impacting people's tolerance of bears. And these two charts here, they're primarily just to show you what the trends are with the kind of calls that we're getting in Region 4, particularly related to bears and garbage, and also property damage issues. And as you can see, we have a trend of increasing situations in both of those cases. So this is a map that GIS helped me with about a year and a half ago. We made it available on our website. People can go in and report seeing a bear and do a pin drop of where they saw it. And it's by no means scientific, but it gives us a pretty good idea of where people are seeing bears and what's going on. And what it tells us is what we've talked about in the past, is that black bears are moving west. And some people call this population expansion. I prefer to refer to it as recolonization or reclaiming former range, because historically bears, they were in the entire state of Tennessee, especially upper west Tennessee, where a lot of bears in the Reelfoot area. So they're just moving into habitat that they normally or historically were in anyway. So, but what this is telling us is, just like we've had around here recently, we got a storm brewing. We got a lot of bears moving westward. And as an agency, as myself, I feel like there's still a lot that needs to be done where we've already have these historical populations. So, we put together a bear management plan a couple of years ago, and over half of that plan addresses bear nuisance issues and conflicts. So it's a very important part of what we're doing in Tennessee regarding bears. It's an important part of what's going on in the entire Southeast. And what we've said in our plan is the agency, we want to promote coexistence of humans and bears whenever possible. And this can be a real challenge for us. And the primary issue that's making this a challenge for us is anthropogenic food sources, which is, there's your buzzword for the day, and you can replace that easily with garbage, okay? Bears and garbage and other food sources, not so much, but sometimes pet foods, bird seed, grills, just different things that are attracting birds that people are putting on the landscape. And in most cases, they're putting on the landscape inadvertently. It's not intentional. And we'll talk about that here in just a minute. But these food sources cause lots of problems for bears, which in turn causes lots of problems for people. And the problems in many cases will overlap. And some of our problems that we're dealing with bears are food conditioned bears. Habituated bears are habituated to people. There's no fear of people. This reduced social carrying capacity. This is a really big deal when you're trying to promote coexistence, because when people are having issues with bears and they get frustrated with them. Then they start calling and making complaints, and they say, you need to do something with these animals. You need to reduce this population, or you need to come get these animals. So people get frustrated, and then when you have a reduction in what people want to tolerate, that makes management more difficult for us. And then obviously there's health issues associated with these kind of food sources. And then quickly for people, you know, there's always that issue when you get bears close to people, the human safety issues, and that's going to be a concern for us. And then we've already mentioned nuisance and property damage. So how are they getting these foods? Well, the first one is intentional feeding. And intentional feeding would be a situation where I define it as the bear and the person are at the scene at the same time. Whether it's a person doing like this and feeding them peanut butter out of a spoon or tossing food to them in a parking lot, that would be intentional feeding. And this incidentally is in Tennessee. This picture was given to me at a check station this fall. And there's nothing that an employee can do about that at this point. Same property. Here we have what appears to be 3 bears eating out of dishes. But if you zoom that in, you can tell that this bear on the left is actually a person that's covered themselves in some sort of a cloak or cape or something and eased out there to interact with those animals. And this is obviously a very concerning situation that we don't want to see. So the second aspect of this is the unintentional feeding. And this is what happens when people, whether it's bird feed or their trash, dumpsters, whatever it may be, they're just living their everyday lives. And these food sources are out there and bears find them. And then they get into them. And what we're seeing in this case, in many instances, it's an ongoing situation, and it's ongoing because the person responsible for that source, for lack of a better word, isn't necessarily interested in making it go away. A lot of times they say, you guys need to come trap these animals, you need to move them, but the issue is if you move those bears, all you're doing is creating an opening for more bears to come in and do the exact same thing at the same spot. It's not the bears aren't the issue, it's the attractant that is the issue in this case. So as an agency, we've been doing a few things to try to address this and educate our public. And you've all heard me talk about BearWise, so I'm not going to go into it today other than just encourage you to take a look at that site if you haven't done so recently, because it is constantly changing. And then something we did this past summer that I was really excited about was some work we did in Gatlinburg. And Commissioner Box is telling me she was in Townsend last weekend. I assume all of you have been to Gatlinburg at some point in your life. And it's a real challenge for our agency because I forget how many million, I think it's 11 million people visit the Smoky Mountains National Park every year, and most of them go through Gatlinburg. So we're getting a new group of visitors every Friday afternoon, and trying to educate those people has been a real challenge for us. And some groups do real well, some rental companies do real well, others do very poorly, and nothing that we've tried has really seemed to stick. But I saw this presentation that Doug Markham did last year, utilizing digital marketing, where they were using internet searches to identify people that were looking to go out west and hunt cervids and educate them about bringing those animals back into Tennessee. So we decided to give that a try at Gatlinburg, and we utilized the same type stuff with internet searches, people that were sitting in their living room in Chicago or Indianapolis looking at Gatlinburg. And we also utilized Facebook, and we utilized the geofencing, where we can mark a general area where we have a lot of conflict. And when people cross into that area, they'll get pop-ups on their phone. And I'm certainly not the expert to explain how all this works, but I know enough to know that we're very pleased with the results. But basically, these people would get a pop-up and get an opportunity to click on this to learn more. They may get a video that they could watch. And what we did a 3-month campaign, months June through August. And in that 3 months, we had almost 1.8 million people got the opportunity to click on one of these pop-ups or watch one of these videos. So we reached 1.8 million people, almost 20,000 people a day with this little pilot project. And that resulted in a little over 18,000 visits to the Bearwise site and over 150,000 video views. So we spent $22,000, which comes out to about 1.2 cents per person. And talking with Jamie Keller at Channel 2, who did this for us, she also did the CWD campaign. She tells me that we met every and exceeded every industry standard on click-through rates and things like that with this program. And she was very excited about the results we had with this program. So I'll go back to this just for a second to segue into the last part of my presentation, but to talk about some other things that our agency, myself and our bear team, would like to see us move forward with and start looking at as a means to continue to deal with this goal of promoting the coexistence of humans and bears. And the ultimate goal is to reduce access to these food sources. That's what we want to do. We want to take these food sources away. And we always tell people when they call, if you move the food, if there's no food, the bear has no reason to stay. And most often than not, that takes care of the problem. They move on. It's just getting people to do that. So some of the things that we can do is we can have passage of feeding regulations. And this can come in a couple of forms. One would be through local ordinances that cities or HOAs or counties put out. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But the ideal type of regulation would be a statewide type regulation regarding feeding. And the beauty of that is that of the 40 states that have black bear and brown bear populations, 28 of them have feeding laws. So that's good because we're not breaking new ground, and we can look at the things that they've done and seen the successes and failures that they've had. And one of the things that you'll find when you talk to these folks is that, you know, intentional feeding is a pretty easy thing to deal with. You can say it's against the law to feed a bear. And everybody pretty much understands these type of situations, what's going on here. It's the unintentional feeding, for lack of a better word, that you really get into a gray area, and you have to be real careful and be very thoughtful about what you're putting into any kind of regulation you're considering. And what we've learned from other states that have gone through this and gone through amending their laws, and Florida would be one of those, is that you have to show that there's an annoyance, an inconvenience, a damage, or a danger that exists. This is a very important aspect of it's not enough that, hey, you have a garbage can outside your door and you live in Sevier County, it should be illegal for you to do that. No, you've got to have more. You've got to have that bear interacting with that attractant and have that problem in existence. And the other thing that's important that they've learned is that you got to give the person an opportunity to clean it up. You can't just knock on the door and issue citations or tell them you got to get this done. You have to let them know what's going on. In many cases, they don't know what to do to alleviate the problem, so you got to give them an opportunity to do that. And then obviously, you have exemptions when you get into farming practices and zoos and things like that. So there's always those type of exemptions that have to be considered. Now I'm certain you guys are going to want to speak more of this in a minute, so I'm going to move on and we can talk more about this in a minute. But I will add on that survey that we asked people, would you support a law requiring people to keep or a law that made it illegal to feed bears intentionally or unintentionally, and we had 70% support for some kind of legislation or regulation related to that. So that's pretty good. We were pretty happy with that, higher than what I thought it would be. In addition to that, this next one is something we already do, but I felt like it was important to mention, is to continue to identify and engage partners. We have several partners we work with already on a regular basis that are up here. I recently did a presentation for Friends of Rome Mountain State Park, and I believe that they're a potential asset to us. There's NGOs, there's businesses that have shown interest. It's just a matter of finding the time to work with them and get their help. But all these groups have a lot of assets that we can leverage, whether it be manpower and volunteers or funding and infrastructure, lots of different things that that can help us out. And so we're going to continue to work with those groups. The third part of it is we'd like to see some funding for some expanded digital marketing. I'm not going to, I mean, I just talked about that a minute ago, so I'll just mention again that, you know, we got to 1.8 million people relatively easy and in a short period of time in an area that we were targeting. You know, it wasn't a shotgun approach. And then lastly, this is something that when, you know, bear managers get together, this is something that gets a lot of discussion. Cost share programs for bear-resistant containers. And I can go, or a wildlife officer can go and speak to a county commission or a homeowners association, and they're pretty open to the things we're telling them. Everything I'm telling you right now, they're gung-ho until we tell them you need to go spend some money and buy some trash cans, and then that's a game changer. And we all know why. I mean, money is always an issue. But one thing that we've learned, I'll mention Florida again, is Florida has figured out that it doesn't take a lot of money to get people interested in wanting to get some of it. And so Florida has put together a program where they're buying, or they're giving grants. They're not buying them, they're giving grants to purchase bear-proof trash cans, dumpsters, and also purchase these hardware kits to retrofit current cans to where they're bear resistant. And so I'm just giving you a little idea of what they did in 2017, and I believe they had, that year was the year they had the most money available. They had $800,000. They've not had that much since, but they did have a pretty good amount of change there. They learned early on that they had more people applying than what they could fund. And in 2017, I believe they had a request of $1.9 million worth of grants for the $800,000. So early on, Florida instituted this ranking system where they try to decide who's going to get the money, and there's a lot of things involved in that. But one of them that's really critical is that they look at whether or not there's a local ordinance in place. Do they have an ordinance that says you have to have your trash can inside at all times unless it's pickup day, whatever it may be? And they found that these cities will pass these ordinances in order to increase their stock, so to speak, on the ranking system. And in 2017 alone, they had 3 counties, 1 city, and multiple HOAs pass ordinances. And some people may be thinking, if you're getting these ordinances, why do you need something statewide? Well, they complement each other. An HOA may have a specific ordinance regarding when people are putting their cans out for pickup, but that doesn't really help the HOA next door or down the road. It just strengthens and complements some sort of statewide regulation. And so in 2017, they put 5,000 plus trash cans, 3 dumpsters, and 3,800 sets of hardware were put out on the landscape, which impacted over 10,000 homes in 1 year. So it's very successful. They're continuing to do this. Obviously, the money fluctuates from year to year based on what they have. And back to our survey, when you ask people, do they think that you should be required to put your trash in bear-proof containers if you live in areas with a lot of bears, you get 90% support for that. And that 90% support is statewide. If you look at just bear counties, what was classified as traditional bear areas, it's 93%. So that's a huge amount of support for a program like this. And then so what we would like to see happens, and you know, we'll be looking at writing up a budget proposal during this year's budget cycle and going through the process, but we'd like to see a similar program that helps put grants out there for these types of containers, and also potentially compactors for counties that have open dumpsters that could use a compactor, and utilizing this program also to find some funding for the digital marketing. So, you know, our goals with a program like this is obviously we want to try to do it without state dollars. And I believe that's where NGOs and our partners can come in and help us to try to find some non-state dollars to do this with. We definitely want the partners to be putting up cash, although some of it could be in-kind matches. We want them to have some skin in the game with some cash. I haven't talked about those percentages yet. And we would also have a rating criteria, and we would certainly look to include ordinances as a incentive for that rating criteria. So I got one last slide here. You know, bear management and dealing with these nuisance issues, there isn't a silver bullet. There's a lot of different things that you got to throw at this problem, and they all work together. And that's what I'm trying to do with this slide here, to show you how these last 4 things that I've mentioned work together. And so you have some sort of statewide feeding regulation, and that's going to reinforce a cost share program for bear resistant containers, because the containers are going to help with compliance, and that's what you want people to do. You want them to comply. A cost share program, and I'm kind of basing this all off the cost share program, but it will encourage local ordinances, which absolutely complement statewide regulations. This cost share program can also provide funding for digital marketing, and it can also educate people about local ordinances. That's one thing I didn't mention, but we would want to do our digital marketing for the most part to focus on those areas that are getting grants, but at the same time, we could keep some back for other areas that need some immediate type of information out there on the landscape. These cost share programs definitely motivate and engage partners who will turn around and help with the funding again. And then they can also help fund digital marketing, and these partners, their influence can encourage and advocate local ordinances. So this slide just is here to show you, and I think everybody realizes that, but it kind of paints a picture of how important all these things are and how they work together for the greater goal of reducing those conflicts. And with that, Commissioner, I can take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Dan. Commissioner Stroud?
Yeah, I've got a question on the, does, obviously Arkansas has bears, right?
Yes, sir.
Louisiana have bears?
Yes, sir.
Mississippi?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so is West Tennessee getting any of those bears?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Mississippi, you know, we have trapped bears, not recently, but we have trapped bears in Memphis before. We've had reports. My uncle lives in a little town called Iuka, Mississippi, and he's told me about seeing articles in the Corinth paper about bear sightings over in Corinth and around there. And so we know that those bears are slowly expanding their range in northern Mississippi up into Tennessee, and that's where we expect southern middle Tennessee or southern west Tennessee to see their bears come in. It's out of Mississippi. And then the Kentucky bear population is doing very well, and it is expanding west as well, and it's impacting, you know, the upper Region 2 and western Region 3 counties, Clay, Macon, and that area there. They're seeing a lot more bear activity, and I'm certain that a lot of that's coming out of Kentucky and the Big South Fork area.
I was talking to someone in Tiptonville the other day, and they were saying that they had seen a bear or sighted a bear, and I was just wondering if maybe it's coming, maybe we're going west, but there's also a ton of bears coming our way too.
There are,
okay.
And it's coming at us around all sides. And you know, the Mississippi River is not a barrier. Commissioner Baker sent me a picture last year. I should have put it up here. I didn't think of it. Of someone that works for him their wife is water skiing on South Holsted, and there's a bear in the background swimming across the lake behind her.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Swan?
Dan, I know for a couple of years there's been conversation about opening archery season for bear on the Cumberland Plateau. Has there been any more thought given to that?
Yes, sir. You know, it is open on a big part of the Cumberland Plateau on the upper end in Zone 4, and we're waiting. Just a reminder to the commission, we're in this 3-year project with other states on our border, South Carolina, Georgia, and North Carolina, to get some density estimates, and then starting this summer, in 3 months, we're going to be doing the exact same thing with Kentucky in the upper Cumberland Plateau. And we'll be able to compare those numbers with what we did back in 2013 and see what kind of growth we've had, if any, that bear population. So we're definitely going to be talking about expanded seasons, not only in new areas, but in areas we're already hunting bears. But we're just waiting to get our data to help us make the best decision regarding that.
Well, the main reason I ask, I live on the Cumberland Plateau, and we don't have an archery season there.
Right.
But there's a lot of bear sightings up on the mountain.
Right.
And
our agency, we want to support hunting and have hunting, but at the same time, we have the responsibility to make sure that those populations are sustainable as well before we open up hunting, and that's what we're trying to document in those areas. And that's part of what that map was, where we're just trying to get people to report what they're seeing. And one of the questions that we asked them is if they saw cubs. And to me, seeing a bear with small cubs is a really big deal, because now you're talking about having reproducing populations in an area. So typically a bear with new cubs, she's not going to move them very far. So when you see that, you've got some different things going on. You're not just talking about young males that are moving around trying to find a home range. You've got bears living there.
I got a question. Dan, do you not do population models by harvesting like some of the other?
You can, and talking with Joe Clark at UT, he's not a big fan of that, because your models really, they're based on harvest. And so if your harvest is going up, your population is going to go up, and if your harvest goes down, your population is going to go down. But I will say they're constantly working on these models and trying to improve them. And at the Eastern Black Bear Workshop in April, we've got a guy scheduled to come talk to all the biologists in the Eastern U.S. About a new model he's been working on that takes some new information that we're starting to gather and puts that into the model. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. And one thing that, models are only as good as what you put in them, and people will tell you, they have the first thing you see when you see models is all the disclaimers that you put in there and all the assumptions that you have to make. So it's no surprise when you have, I can tell you, if you put this data in a model, it's going to show we have a lot of bears. But to get really accurate is how many we have. And a year like this year, where we went from in the 500s up to 760, it's going to really throw it for a loop and take a couple of years for that to kind of mellow out a little bit and get back up to speed. So,
I'm surprised that you said that. We see so many population models. Some of your other biologists might not be so happy, because it seems like to me that every other model we use is a harvest model.
Right. Well, that's what we have. That's what we've always had, and I've said that before. This DNA stuff with bears that's the latest and greatest, and it's always been a challenge with big game animals, is especially ones that move so much, is getting a good population estimate. Deer, they're starting to use this same technology with deer and elk, and utilizing SCAT to get the DNA and doing a mark especially a mark capture type study. So the technology and GPS collars, where where bears and animals are all the time, all this stuff is helping us do a better job of this thing. But models in the past, that's been all we've had.
Commissioner Gardner.
Yeah, thanks for the briefing, and I want to commend you for using the social media to try to help get the word out on the Bear Wise program. And I appreciate the hat. I was wondering if you could elaborate on what you're doing with the hat and the data it's providing for you. Just like everybody to hear that.
Right, and thank you for asking. So the hats, if you remember, we went to electronic check-in last year, and I wasn't. I was a little concerned about that, primarily just to gather teeth and look at age data. So we went with that, and just for someone gets the opportunity to ask, I'll go ahead and tell you that 63% of the bears harvested were checked in through the internet, and that's a little lower than what I told you yesterday, Commissioner, because I carried a 1 when I wasn't supposed to in my math. But so anyway, 63% of the harvested bears were checked in by the internet, and what's really interesting is 88% of those were checked in by phone. So the phone is definitely the deal. So what we wanted to do was encourage people to continue to send those teeth in, because that's where we were getting them. We were from check stations, and we told them we'd give them a hat. And so these are the hats. We just got them on Tuesday, and they'll start going out to people. And it's interesting. I wanted to make something unique that just didn't say Bear Cooperator. So this patch is actually the agency issued, actually the Wildlife Commission issued patches for stamps for a very short time for big game, and one of these years in '59 they had the bear on there, so that's the only stamp that has a black bear on it, and that's I have that stamp is actually in my collection, so we scanned it and had these made, and I think the hunters are going to like them. And we'll look at something. I got something different. It's also kind of traditional. It goes back to the 50s to do for next year. But one thing that's really unique is, you know, when that stamp was made and there was a bear on there, I don't have any figures for 1959, but based on what was going on in the 70s, I doubt there were many bears being harvested in Tennessee. So it kind of represents a success story as well.
So is it too early to gauge the success of the exchanging the hat for the teeth? You know,
It is. You know, this year we're probably looking at about 13% return, and that's a little lower than what we want to see. But with a really high harvest, a lot of people that aren't sending them in. You know, these are first time people kill bears for the first time, may not be aware of it. I believe when people see the hats out on hunters, they'll get interested and be more apt to do it. And then also, there's just not a tradition of submitting teeth on the plateau, and so we got to really figure out a way to get more interest on the plateau. And I haven't looked to see how many we got this year, but I'm hoping that we got a handful and that folks will see these hats on the heads of their friends, and they'll want one next year and send it in to us.
And one last thing, if you're, what teeth are you requesting? I mean, like if you're going to mount a bear,
right,
or you're not getting the teeth that are affect your mount, are you? Or
no, and technically you could use any tooth, but the one we want is the premolar that sits behind the canine. It's a very, very small tooth, and really you have to look pretty hard to see it. It only sticks out about 1/4 of an inch in most cases, so it doesn't affect a mount by any means.
Yeah, that's another important thing to let everybody know, so it doesn't affect your mount or anything, and you can get a cool cap and provide data to the agency. That's awesome. Thank you.
Right. You bet.
All right.
Thank you, Dan. We'll get your teeth here before you leave.
Thank you, Dan. For those of you that don't know, Director Carter was one of the pioneers of stalking bears in West Tennessee. He can fill you in on that if you'd like to hear it. But I'm going to call on Michael May.
Thank you, Chairman. Tag, I'm it, huh? All right.
He's a pioneer, all right. I'm not sure.
All right, thank you. I'm here to talk about a proposed concept solution for tagging. So to begin, let's talk about the overview and history. So a while back, the agency considered a return to the physical tags, and as you remember, that ended up being a financial issue for us for sure. And so the commission decided to get rid of it. I guess to get rid of my presentation. So to get rid of that, not past that, and commission asked the agency to go back and see what we can do about finding alternate solutions. So the arrows aren't working. There you go. So for alternate solutions, we needed to look at, we decided to look at a couple different things, new developments in technology that we had, and then customer behavior to see where we could go. All right? So take a look at a big thing that we did with the branch system. Just recently, we were able to negotiate a free contract, or a free mobile app with branch system as an amendment to that contract. And what that really gave us was a whole new robust mobile app that Jennifer pitched and presented to the commission last month. But one of the big things it provided us was the option and the ability for individuals to report their harvest while they had cell service or not cell service. So that was a big key for us, which would allow us to do something special that we think here. Then we took a look at our customer behavior. See, what we have here, we have 90% of our customers are harvesting with the mobile device. And the remainder of that, 10%, a little bit over 5%, are doing harvest at the license agent, and the rest are doing it with an agency staff member at those license agents. So the vast majority are doing it with the mobile app. So what we came up with was a concept. So a concept idea of going down an e-tagging system, a hybrid system. The primary piece of it would be an e-tag system. So the individual would be able to do pretty much no different than what they already are doing, to be able to harvest their animal in the middle of nowhere if they had cell service or not. And then the remaining 10% of the people could use a paper tag. And I'll show you the two different types of paper tag systems we're taking a look at. So for the e-tag, 90% of the people, like I already mentioned, it's really easy to do. How many people in the commission have done it already? Do you like it? Pretty easy? All right. So as of right now, this is how it looks. You take your phone out, you harvest an animal, you go through the steps, you get a confirmation, and there's basically a tag that you have right there. We were proposing that we could move forward and physically design something really cool, a technical visual tag that would look like a tag. We could do that as well, but basically right there you have an e-tag. That would be the 90% of the people would be able to do that. And then for the other individuals that we're looking at that maybe can't do it because of the demographics that we have, landowners or religiously exempt individuals that wouldn't be able to use a mobile device, those types of people would be able to use a paper tag. And the primary type of paper tag we would like to be able to use is the individuals primarily would buy their tags or buy their license at a Walmart or so, and they get their license printed out on an 8.5 by 11. On that 8.5 by 11, we would have tags on there with an encrypted barcode, right? I'll show you that in a second. And then we do have about 300 more POS machines out in the state that use durable stock paper like we used to have, and we could put tags on those as well. So on the 8.5 by 11, here's a mock-up of a concept of what the tags would look like. We'd have an encrypted barcode on there that would have all of the individual's information specific to that hunter and what types of license they have and how many tags they have left in their bag limit. And that's what that would look like, printed out along with their license. Whoop. I think this is the old version.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to fix.
Okay. While they're working on that real quick, we have a visual of what the durable stock tag would look like, and just conceptually it's going to look a lot like, it'll look a lot like that, but on the end of a durable stock tag, if you can envision that. So, moving forward, the road ahead would be, we're in a concept mode right now, trying to figure out what we need to do as an agency, and we've brought in the Wildlife Division, law enforcement, marketing, IT, licensing, legal, and asked all the different questions on what we need to do moving forward to make this type of thing happen. It's really a concept where it saves us money and addresses the issue that we have with not going backwards. It allows the people that are already 90% of our customers are using the phone and they really like it. How do we thread that needle to be able to not alienate any of our demographics and save money? So the next step would be, if we move down this path, would be to continue down the research and development piece of the technology, work with Brant, ensure that we're able to do this, which I know we can, but make it work exactly right, work with the Wildlife Division and the Law Enforcement Division to make sure that on the tags we have everything on there that they need for data, and we implement a system that will work. And I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, the biggest piece of this is the tag before you drag. If we implement this, my apologies, if we implement this, what we would be able to do is say that when you're out and you're hunting, you have to be able to tag your deer or your big game animal before you move it. Whether it's with the phone, you have your tag on you, on your phone, or one of these other two types of paper tags. So that's really the big benefit of it. And then we go into a testing phase and then the rollout. But we do, full disclosure here, we do need to sit down and figure out inside the agency, how are we going to address the customer exemptions, the different types of demographics who do not have to have a license, or like the religiously exempt and the landowners, the children, the grandchildren, those types of things. So that's a big ticket item right now that we're trying to figure out. So that's one thing that we need to do. Did I lose you? All right. So that is the road ahead. Do you have the visual? One more. There you go. So that would be what the durable stock tags look like, and don't forget that those are the ones that are only in 300 locations around the state. So our idea was that those would be at the very bottom of the quantity of numbers that would be utilized, but they are some of the licensed agents that we do have out there right now. So we want to be able to afford that technical option for that capability.
Right. Okay.
Did I miss anything? I don't think I did. I got screwed up with that a little bit. Sorry.
Sorry. Commissioner Cook.
Michael, I want to commend you and your group for this. I know this is another multi-year effort, and I think this is a great system. You know, it was far too expensive the way we used to do it. You were given the task to figure out, you and your group were given a task to figure out, you know, okay, what can we do? And you've captured at least 90% of people with the phone. And yes, there is some more to be worked out, but you know, in my opinion, I think this is really important because we are a data-driven agency, and if we can have the best compliance possible, of course, folks are not going to be fully compliant, but if we can at least have a system that encourages compliance, I think that gives us the best data, and you've done this at a much less expensive and much more efficient way, so thank you very much.
You're welcome. It was really an agency endeavor.
Mr. Cox.
Do you need or do you want commission guidance approval or on this, or is this something that you're going to implement by the end of new license season next year?
That would be the soonest that we could implement it, and if that's what if the commission guides us in that direction, we will make that happen.
But you can do that.
We have some things that we need to discuss and change and fix and make sure that will work, namely those legal issues that I spoke about.
Right.
And I think we're way down the line on making sure that the technical things will be solved. But I do believe that the soonest we'd be able to do that, and taking all of those factors into consideration, would be the beginning of the next license year in 2020.
So you're comfortable with that?
Yes, sir.
Do we need to ask that be done for guidance? We've been talking about this, and I think that would be appropriate for the commission to approve and give them guidance on this to try to get this done by the new license season. I believe that's what he's asking for.
For this coming fall,
Not
for the season after.
Next, with the end of this March 1st of next year.
Yes.
So it takes effect for turkey season of 2020.
That would be the earliest we could do it, sir.
Right. Well, I mean, that's what they're shooting for. Right. And is there action that we should take in order to? I'm not sure I understand what you.
Well,
let me ask Director Carter. Can I ask you a question, Director Carter? Is this something the agency is going to move forward with without action, or do we need to take action? And
I don't believe you have to take official action to do it. We certainly know the intent of the commission, and that falls in line with what we're trying to do. We would accept it either way, but we're going to try to move forward with that date in mind, and unless something happens, that's what we're shooting for.
Okay, thank you.
Are you good with that, Commissioner Cox?
Sure. I just want to, we've talked about this over 2 or 3 years, and they've kind of looked to us to try to help guide them. And I'm great with this. They've done a lot of work, and Michael and I have talked for hours about this, so I'm good. I just don't want to leave here without the understanding the commission wants to do this and wants to do it before next turkey season of 2020.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely. You're still the chairman.
For another few days.
Sir.
Thank you. Just a very quick straw poll. It's yes and no are perfectly fine answers. What's the opinion of the commission as to whether they think this is a worthwhile thing? Let's break it into 3. This is very important. This is kind of important, not really important. So who thinks it's very important? Is that everybody? Yeah, is that everybody? Well, just wanted to get a feel for where the commission. I had said, I believe, when we've spoken, I said I believe the commission is fully behind this. And just quick opinion. So thank you.
We'll go back to our nerdery and make it happen.
All right. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
You know, I'm not going to get many more opportunities to poke fun at my big buddy down there on the end.
You are correct.
But
knock yourself out.
poor Michael for talking for hours to him. But anyway, Mr. Chairman, that concludes the business of the Wildlife Committee. I would like to say this group's worked hard this year. It's been an honor to be the chairman. A good group of it's an excellent group. Just enjoyed working with each one of them.
Totally agree, and thank you for your leadership in that, and you had a great committee. So thank you for that. I'd like to recognize Chairman Woodson for the Fisheries Management Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to recognize Frank Fiss, our Chief of Fisheries.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Do I have you're going to do it? Okay, great. I just want to remind everyone that the Bassmaster Classic is almost upon us. Us in the agency are really getting a sense of this. While the public will see it from the 15th to 17th, our activities have already begun, but our activities on the ground are going to start on Tuesday that week on the 12th. I just wanted to go over quickly some of the things that we're going to be doing as an agency so you kind of get a sense for our participation. It's really an all-hands effort. All divisions are involved in this. It's a great opportunity for the the agency to celebrate fishing and to really talk about how good fishing is in Tennessee, promote fishing while we're at it. So the Fisheries Division will be preparing media materials to handle interviews in a orderly and consistent fashion. We've got we're going to have people doing live interviews. We're going to be returning the bass to the lake each day after the tournaments on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we're going to have multiple hatchery trucks and people taking care of them fish and returning them afterwards. That's one of the things that BASS was expressly asking us to do. And we're also going to have fishery staff at the expo booth where people will be coming by asking questions about anything that the agency does, but we'll certainly be ready for fishing questions. The Law Enforcement Division has been very busy. They have a plan to handle emergencies and to handle the increased boating traffic that we'll experience on the tournament is on Fort Loudon and Tellico Lakes. So that they have been working on that already, and they anticipate a lot of effort. They're going to need to be there on Tuesday to participate in the anglers meeting to tell them where the no-wake zones and all the hazards are. So again, that's when we really start working with them. The Honor Guard has been asked to serve their role in the opening ceremony and the first weigh-in, all on that Friday, the 15th. And the rest of the work, the Outreach and Communications Division, Multimedia Divisions, the license, everybody's getting involved. They're preparing media materials. They're going to be working the expo booth for Q&A. There's going to be license sales at the expo. There's going to be an archery event outside. There's a hooked on fishing event that the BASS puts on with outside activities for the kids, and we'll have our blow up archery thing there. That should be a good time. And we're also going to have our media team covering the event, not only what's happening, but how we're engaged in it. So people will want to know, for example, that we put the fish back. We'll probably have some video of that happening. Lastly, but not least, we've got support from Region 4 office. Their team is coming down to help sell licenses and man the booth. And we've asked for volunteers from across the state. Anyone that's interested in bass fishing that might serve some other role that wants to come help out, they're going to come over and help out to field that team that we're going to have in place for that week. I don't have a lot of real specific details about exactly when things are happening. I've been surprised at how, not slow, but that the pace that Bass has decided to share that information with us. They apparently do one tournament at a time, and we're still getting information that we need to have a plan. Once I have a plan, or the group has a plan of what's going to happen, we will share what's appropriate with the commissioners that are attending, and at some point we'll need to know who does plan to attend and who doesn't, so I can have a sense of just a head count to know who might be interested in different activities. And I won't be able to handle that now until I have that other information. But that's where we're at with the Classic.
Great,
Thank you, Frank. Sorry. I thought I was still in Wildlife.
Well, I mean, I know you're going to
But
get
I'm gonna
elected
let- I'll-
chairman
I'll let
tomorrow,
you go
but
ahead.
if you
I'll
want
let
to,
you go ahead.
you can have the committee. It's okay. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, do we have any questions for members of the gang? Yes, sir. Commissioner Woods.
Frank, did I not see something? Aren't they having a couple of
guess, high school tournaments going on at the same time?
They are on the Friday and Saturday. They're going to have a high school one day and a college the next day, and that lake is to be determined at this time. We don't know where that's going to be. But we'll certainly, they will bring their fish back to the arena for weigh-in, and we will take them back to the lake.
So it's affiliated with this?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Great. Other questions? Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Woodson, and thank you, Frank. It was a great opportunity for our state. I'd like to recognize Chairman McLaren for the Property and Infrastructure Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'd like to recognize Bobby Wilson, Assistant Director.
Thank you, Commissioner McLaren and Commissioners. I would like to mention that the Classic, if you've never been to one, the expo was about the equivalent to the National Wild Turkey Federation expo. It's huge. It's a really big deal. So I think you'll get a big kick out of going there. So I'm going to talk today about Percy Priest Wildlife Management Area Unit 1. It's an update on what's been going on there lately, and I think it's good news. So it's not anything bad. I'm not asking anything, just more of an update. So just a little bit about it. It's part of the WMA, the Unit 1 area is used for field dog trials and for training. And what's unique about it is not just for one particular type of hunting dog. It's for several. It's for the rabbit dogs, the quail dogs, and also the retrievers. So it's utilized by all three, and all three have representation in the form of a club, so to speak, I guess. And then they're all represented by an association. I think it's called the Tennessee Field Dog Trial Association, but I'm not 100% sure on that name. And so we've, I'll go to the next slide. A little bit about the regulations that apply to that area is that it's open year-round to training, except that from September 1 to April 30th, Friday, Saturday, and Sundays only, it's field trials only. And nearly every weekend, if not every weekend, there is some type of trial going on, field trial going on there during that time period. But also that to remind everybody that on Monday through Thursday during that time, there's open to everybody else. And of course, from May 1st to the end of August, it's open 7 days a week. So what I want to talk about today is particular sections of the WMA and what's been done lately there, which is the purpose of my presentation. I want to talk about the crops around it. They're sharecropped. They're in a sharecropping contract with the farmer, and we've altered what they can plant out there at the request of some of the association. Also talk about the field dog trial pond area, and then I'm going to talk about the dog trial structures in the upper right. It's kind of hard to see there, but it's kind of where the headquarters is, where everybody gathers when they have these field dog trials. And just a little bit of background about them is this has been here for I don't know how long, but probably back in the 60s, if not before. And I know that some of the facilities there, some of the grounds and all this as things happen over time, they need some improvements. And so back in at least 2014 and maybe 2015, agency personnel met with association representatives and to talk about what could be done, what needed to be done. And so we started making progress towards that, of course, a few steps at a time. And the first thing I want to talk about is the changes in the crop plantings. I'm also going to talk about the tree removal in the retriever area, the pond area, and improvements in the retriever pond, and also the clubhouse rehabilitation. So the crop plantings changes took place because there was some concern over some areas, particularly with corn plantings in the quail area as well as the retriever area. They asked if they could. How that happened, but they asked if we could ask the farmer to change that so that there's not apparently those particular crops, corn, interfere with quail, and as far as the retrievers go too, they did the same thing. So we did that. We also specified a date in which the farmer would try to get their crops out so that it wouldn't interfere with a lot of their field trials. And then they also asked to remove the trees. The trees in the retriever area, the pond area, kind of inhibit the view. These judges have to see a long way off to be able to see the dogs, and sometimes these trees are getting away and they couldn't exactly see all the moves these dogs were making. And so they asked if we could see about moving some of those trees, and that we had to do some bat surveys because, as you know, some trees are important for bats, endangered species, that might be use them for brood areas, for nursing areas, or for habitat that they might utilize. So we conducted a bat survey and determined that there would be no impact from if we had to remove those trees. And so we did. Then in the pond itself, there was an invasive species, an aquatic invasive species, non-native, that was inhabiting just about the entire body of water. And so with that, we felt like we could remove that, as it would be a good thing for that particular area, to get rid of those non-natives. And also there was water control structure issue that it wasn't properly functioning. So we felt like we needed to go in and do something with that to allow that water to remain and maintain as best we could for a little bit longer than we could. A lot of times that water, most of the times that water is regulated by the water level of the lake. Percy Priest Lake, you can't see it from here, but you'll see it in a slide or two. It's just to the left of this levee and this pond. And when the lake goes up, the water level in the pond stays up. When it goes down, a lot of times the water will empty. So typically we try to do work like that when it's dry and hot, and like in August, but you can see it's not. And if you recall back, we've had quite a bit of rain last year during the times of years that we really expected it to be dry and hot. So it became a challenge for our crews to get in and do some work with the pond and the water control structures. Although in October, as this picture shows, they did do some improvements there. It was a little bit drier during that time period, so we made some improvements. An area photo showing what it looks like, at least back in October. It looks pretty much the same now, but we were able to make some improvements in spite of the wet conditions. And I want to point out the cleared area to the left was where the trees were, and now it's cleared so the judges and the trainers can see better for their retrievers. And again, in December, wet conditions again, and to the left, though, you can see that we were able to put some riprap and gravel or rock along the levee there and raise it up a little bit and begin construction on the water control structure. Just another picture of what it looks like with the gravel on it so that you could go across it a lot better. And this is a photo of not complete, but almost complete water control structure back in January. Of course, back in January, as you know, we had a lot of wet weather, so that was very challenging for us to do a lot of the dirt work as well. So to kind of give you an update of status of that, it's about 90%, if not better, complete. We have to do a little more dressing around the shoreline for the pond itself. And then the water control structure, I think there was a valve added, a screw gate added recently. And so since that was done, that was made a big part of the completion, almost finished there for that pond. And then I mentioned where the gathering place is, the clubhouse. There's where all the folks gather and meet when they register, when they hang out, when they give the results of the field trials and things like that. And this has been here for a long time, I think back in the 70s, if not before. And it just needed some uplifting, some rehab, because as you can see, it just needed quite a bit of work on there. So enter the Union Sportsmen's Alliance. Now the Union Sportsmen's Alliance, you may recall, was a group that helped us with the courtesy dock and the fishing pier there at Harrison Bay State Park in a particular cove. And they're made up, their goal or their part of their charter is for conservation. And these are made up of union tradesmen of various, whatever their trade is, whether it be electrical, plumbing, or roofing or something, but they all get involved with doing work across the country, not just Tennessee, although their headquarters is here in Tennessee. And we plan on doing more partnership work with them. In fact, we have a fishing event that that we're partnering with them. I think it's going to take place in April. So these are just some pictures of some of their members out there helping, and also they would get some assistance from members of the association as well. They'd like to get local help as well as their own help with their skilled labor so they can get some better buy-in and have partners in whatever they do. Just a picture of them painting inside the clubhouse and making some improvements in there. And this is kind of a before shot and an after shot, even though like I mentioned, the roof, it's a work in progress. They're not finished yet. They've still got to fix the roof and a few other things, painting. Another before and after with the new wood, new lumber. They put some light fixtures. They had to rewire just about the whole thing because it was, the wiring was in terrible condition there. And just a shot of the under support there, the beams where they had to replace or support, and then also some lighting on the inside of that pavilion there. This is a picture of the interior with the cabinets and the countertops, and as you can see over to the far right, the sink and the counters of the cabinets in there were in pretty bad shape. The appliances were barely functional. So we submitted a grant to the Union Sportsman Alliance back in the fall, and to give them some money to based on some appropriation that this commission made last year to go towards improvements to be made out at the Unit 1 field trial area. And so they've gone and done a lot of work in there. This is kind of what it looks like today, although as you see, it's not completed yet. Some of those cabinets still hadn't been hung, and the appliances are still in boxes, and the countertops are not all there. But it's a great improvement over was there, and we're not finished yet, or they're not finished yet. Just a picture of the lighting structure, of what it was and what it looks like now. So a big thank you to the Union Sportsmen's Alliance for their efforts and their work. And like I said, I think they've got a detail out there the first weekend in March, in which they're going to try to replace the roof weather dependent. What I don't have a picture of, and what I haven't mentioned yet, is the assistance from our own people, especially Glenn Rogers. Glenn is the wildlife technician that's stationed at, where's Glenn? There he is. Stand up, please. Glenn is, and also for his supervisor, Michael Boble, who is the area manager for Old Hickory and Percy Priest, to allow Glenn to go out there and do all this work. But we hear nothing but good things about Glenn and all the work he's done out there and all the assistance from the association folks, as well as from our own individual employees who work out there and have this work done. And he goes way out of his way, above and beyond, to do the work out there and help those people out there with the field trial. So anyway, that's all I've got. If anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Okay, thank you, Bobby. I think we've got a question.
I actually don't have a question, Bobby. I wanted to say thank you. It's one of the most highly utilized WMAs that we have in the entire state. There, as you mentioned, there are 14 different clubs made up of hundreds, probably thousands of Tennesseans who are participating and really care deeply about that property and are really high users of it. It's a property that brings in folks from all over the country, and the economic impact on Middle Tennessee and the state has been pretty significant. And I really appreciate all of the work that the agency, and Glenn, thank you for this is one of a million things that the team at the agency are doing at that property. But Glenn is just such a friend to the folks who really care a lot about it. So I just wanted to say thank you. And a few more thank yous. The Union Sportsmen's Alliance, they're doing great work. There's another work day that they're doing to finish up on March 2nd. They've really been spectacular. And it was borderline a dangerous site to be in, from a public safety, but it certainly wasn't, I think, the look and the feel that I know that we would all want. And there have been a lot of hands on deck to make that happen, and I just appreciate the agency's leadership, because that connection was made because of Bobby and the team and others, and I really appreciate that very much. And I think last, I just want to thank Eric Gothorpe, who is a Middle Tennessee resident. He is the citizen who has worked with the 14 different clubs and all of the different folks, and he's been liaison with the agency on this. And, but for the weather, wow, what an experience. And I know that Eric very much and the members of all of these user groups really appreciate the effort that's gone in, and I personally do very much, so thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bush. I also would need to recognize Richard Kirk and the Wildlife Division, as well as Dwight Hensley and the Engineering Division for their incredible work they've done out there too. So,
absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other comments? Chairman?
Thank you, Chairman McLaren. And that, we're going to move the retention committee meeting to tomorrow, so that concludes our agenda for today. Are there any comments from the commission? Director Carter, any comments?
Just a couple. One, back to the Bass Classic, the Classic in Knoxville. I get my, the American Sport Fishing Association Board is going to meet in conjunction with that. And they're the people who own they're the manufacturers that do the boats, all the fishing tackle and all that, and they're from all over the United States and Canada. But anyway, they're going to meet there as well, and I think there's going to be a possibility for some interaction between our commission and them. Logistics still, working on that, but I'm thinking it'll be on that Thursday night probably but anyway, I'll get back to y'all on when that might occur. The other thing, as far as commissioners who might be utilizing the transportation that we're providing tonight for the little function, we probably need to leave the hotel at 6. So need to load up prior to that, and we'll try to get out of there at 6 if you're using our transportation. So other than that, thank you for a good day.
Thank you, Director Carter. Any other comments? We'll reconvene in the morning at 9, and we adjourn. Thank you.